The dust rose in angry clouds as the wagons rolled into Stillwater Ridge, carrying their cargo of desperate women and broken promises. Eliza pressed herself against the wooden slats, feeling every rut in the road like a punch to the gut. Beside her, a blonde girl who couldn't have been more than 17 sobbed into her hands. Across from them, an older woman with gray threading through her dark hair stared at nothing, her face carved from stone. "First time?" the older woman asked without looking at Eliza. Eliza shook her head, then realized the woman wasn't watching. "No, third territory. They always send me back." "Smart of them," the blonde girl said between sobs, then seemed to realize what she'd said. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Eliza kept her voice flat. 26 years of hearing it had worn the sting down to a dull ache. "And you're right. I'm here because I'm what's left when all the pretty ones get picked." The wagon lurched to a stop. Male voices shouted outside, rough and eager. Eliza had heard those voices before in 3 different territories, in front of 4 different crowds. The script never changed much. The ending was always the same. "Listen up!" A man's voice cracked like a whip. "You know the rules. Territorial Settlement Act of 1867 allows for arranged marriages to stabilize frontier communities. You look them over, you make your choice, you register with the territorial agent. Any woman not chosen within 3 days gets sent to the workhouses. Let's keep this orderly." The wagon's gate dropped open with a clang that made the blonde girl jump. Sunlight flooded in, blinding after the darkness. Eliza squinted against it, already knowing what she'd see. A platform, a crowd of men, and faces that would range from curious to cruel. "Move!" the driver barked. They climbed down one by one. The blonde girl went first, and Eliza heard the crowd's reaction, wolf whistles, calls of approval, the sound of men trying to outbid each other with promises they probably wouldn't keep. The older woman went next to a more moderate response. Then it was Eliza's turn. She stepped into the light and heard the sound that always came. Silence, then laughter. "Jesus Christ," someone said. "That's what they're sending now? Must have been a slow year in the city. I'd rather stay single." Eliza climbed onto the platform, her face burning but her expression locked down tight. She'd learned early not to cry, not to react, not to give them the satisfaction. She stood with her shoulders back and her chin up, even as the laughter spread through the crowd like a disease. The territorial agent, a weasel-faced man named Cutler, stood at the edge of the platform with his ledger. "Gentlemen, we have 8 women today. As you can see, there's something for every taste." He smiled when he said it, looking directly at Eliza. "Some more than others." More laughter. Eliza counted the cracks in the wooden planks beneath her feet. 17. She'd gotten good at finding things to count. The choosing started. The blonde girl, Sarah, according to Cutler's ledger, went first, snapped up by a clean-shaven man in a new suit who probably thought he was getting a bargain. The older woman went to a widower with 3 children who looked like he needed a mother more than a wife. One by one, the women stepped forward, and one by one, men claimed them. Eliza stood still as the platform emptied around her. This part she knew well. The waiting while everyone else got chosen, the growing certainty that she'd be sent back, the humiliation of standing alone while the crowd slowly realized she was what was left. "Well," Cutler said when only Eliza remained, "any takers for this one?" Silence. Men turned away, suddenly interested in their boots or the horizon. A few laughed, most just ignored her. "Come now, gentlemen. She's healthy, she can work, and she's—" Cutler paused, searching for something positive to say. "Sturdy." "Sturdy like a mule," someone called out. The crowd roared. Eliza's fingernails dug into her palms. She would not cry. She would not give them that. "Tell you what," Cutler said, warming to his role. "I'll sweeten the pot. Any man who takes this one gets an extra land grant, 50 acres on top of the standard homestead." A few men perked up at that, but nobody moved forward. 50 acres wasn't enough to overcome what they saw when they looked at her. "Nobody?" Cutler's smile had an edge now. "Not even you, Hale." The name cut through the noise like a blade. The crowd shifted, turning to look at someone in the back. Eliza followed their gaze and saw him for the first time. He stood apart from the others, half in shadow near a hitching post where a massive black horse waited. Tall, maybe 6'2", with shoulders that strained his worn jacket. Dark hair hung to his collar, and several days of stubble shadowed his jaw. But it was his eyes that held her, cold and gray as a winter sky, staring at Cutler with something that might have been contempt. "I'm not here to participate," he said. His voice was low and rough, like he didn't use it much. "But you are here," Cutler pressed. "First time you've shown your face in town in what, 3 years? Thought you might be interested." He gestured at Eliza. "Nobody else wants her. Might as well let her rot on your mountain as in a workhouse." The crowd laughed again, but it sounded nervous now. Men kept glancing at Hale like they weren't sure what he'd do. "Leave him alone, Cutler," someone called. "Hale doesn't want anything to do with this circus." "That's right," another man added. "Man keeps to himself, doesn't bother anyone." "But that's the problem, isn't it?" Cutler's voice rose. "Keeping to yourself isn't how we build a community. The territorial governor wants settlements, families, stability, not hermits hiding in the mountains." Hale's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. "Tell you what," Cutler said. "You take her, you get left alone. Nobody bothers you about community involvement, church attendance, any of it. You get your solitude, the girl gets a home instead of a work camp. Everyone wins." I said no. "Why?" Cutler spread his hands. "It's not like she's going to complain. Look at her. Nobody else wants her. You'd be doing her a favor. Hell, you'd be doing all of us a favor." Something in Eliza snapped. 26 years of being looked through, talked over, and discarded like garbage. And she was done. "I don't need favors from men who can't even look at me while they discuss me like livestock." The crowd went quiet. Cutler's smile disappeared. "You'd better watch your mouth, girl. I decide whether you go to a home or a work camp, and right now you're not making a strong case." "Then send me to the work camp." Eliza's voice shook, but she kept going. "At least there I'll be judged on what I can do instead of what I look like." "You think you're too good for this?" Cutler stepped closer. "You think you have options?" "I think I'm done standing on this platform while you all pretend I'm not human." Cutler's face flushed red. "You ungrateful—" "I'll take her." Every head turned. Hale had moved forward, close enough now that Eliza could see the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the flat way he looked at Cutler like a man assessing a threat. "What?" Cutler blinked. "I said I'll take her." Hale pulled a worn leather pouch from his jacket and tossed it to Cutler. "Registration fee. Whatever else you need, you can ride out to the ranch tomorrow." Cutler caught the pouch, hefted it, and smiled. "Well, well, I knew you'd see reason." He turned to Eliza. "Congratulations, you just got lucky." Eliza stared at Hale. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on Cutler with an expression that made several men in the crowd take a step back. "Sign your ledger," Hale said. "I want to leave." Cutler scribbled in his book, then thrust it at Hale. "Need both signatures." Hale signed without looking, then held the pen out to Eliza. She climbed down from the platform on shaking legs and took it. The pen felt heavy in her hand, like it was made of lead instead of wood. She signed next to his name. Rowan Hale. "Done." Cutler slapped the book shut. "She's yours. Treat her well, or don't. Territorial law says once you're married, it's your business." Hale turned and walked toward his horse without another word. Eliza stood frozen, unsure what to do. "Well," Cutler said. "Go on. Follow your husband." Husband. The word felt strange and wrong. Eliza had never imagined having a husband, much less one who looked like he'd just bought a piece of furniture he didn't want. She hurried after Hale, her bag clutched against her chest. He was already mounted, the black horse shifting under him. Without looking down, he extended his hand. Eliza hesitated. She'd never ridden a horse before. "Take it," Hale said. "Or walk." She grabbed his hand. His grip was calloused and strong, and he pulled her up behind him like she weighed nothing. The horse sidled sideways, and Eliza grabbed Hale's jacket to keep from sliding off. "Hold on," he said, and kicked the horse into a canter. They left Stillwater Ridge at a pace that made Eliza's teeth rattle. Behind them, she heard Cutler's voice. "Remember, Hale? I'll be out tomorrow to verify the marriage is legitimate." Hale's shoulders tensed, but he didn't slow down. The town fell away quickly, replaced by scrub grass and scattered pines. The road, if you could call it that, wound upward into foothills that grew steeper with each mile. Eliza clung to Hale's jacket, trying not to think about what happened if she fell at this speed. They rode for over an hour before Hale finally slowed the horse to a walk. The land around them had changed completely. Tall pines surrounded them now, and the air smelled like resin and cold water. Somewhere nearby, Eliza heard a creak. "Why?" she said finally. The word came out hoarse. Hale didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was flat. "Cutler's been trying to force me off my land for 2 years. Taxes, regulations, community requirements, anything he can think of. This was his latest move. Show up and participate or face consequences. So you bought yourself some peace." Something like that. "And I'm just the price you paid." Hale's shoulders shifted. "I didn't have to pick you specifically. No, you just had to pick the one nobody else wanted, the easy choice." "There's nothing easy about any of this." They rode in silence after that. The trail grew narrower, winding between massive pines and over rocky outcrops that made Eliza grateful she wasn't walking. The sun moved lower, casting long shadows through the trees. "How much farther?" she asked as twilight began to settle. "Another hour." "Your ranch is 2 hours from town?" "Closer to 3 when you're not pushing it." Hale shifted in the saddle. "That's the point." Full dark had fallen by the time they reached the ranch. Eliza could barely make out the shapes of buildings in the moonlight. A main house, a barn, several smaller structures. No light showed in any windows. Hale dismounted and helped Eliza down, then led the horse toward the barn. "Main house is unlocked. Kitchen's to the right. There's cold stew in the larder if you're hungry." "Where are you going?" "Take care of the horse. Unload supplies." "I can help." "Don't need help." He disappeared into the barn's darkness. Eliza stood alone in the yard, her bag at her feet, staring at the dark house. This was her new home. This was her new life. She'd gone from being unwanted on a platform to being unwanted on a mountain. She picked up her bag and walked to the house. The door opened with a creak that sounded loud in the quiet. Inside, it smelled like wood smoke and leather. She fumbled along the wall until she found matches and a lamp. The light revealed a main room that served as both living space and kitchen. Simple furniture, nothing fancy. Clean, though, cleaner than she'd expected. A fireplace dominated one wall, cold now. Shelves lined another, holding books, more books than she'd expected to find out here. A table with 4 chairs, though it looked like only one chair saw regular use, doors leading to what must be bedrooms. The larder held exactly what Hale had promised, a pot of stew, cold but still good. Eliza ate standing up, too tired to bother with a plate. She'd just finished when she heard boots on the porch. Hale came in carrying 2 crates. He set them down without looking at her, then grabbed the lamp and headed for one of the bedrooms. A minute later, he came back out. "Your room," he said, pointing. "Clean sheets on the bed. Wood stove works if you get cold. Privy's out back, water pumps by the barn." "Where do you sleep?" "Other room." He moved toward it, then paused. "Cutler's coming tomorrow to verify the marriage. That means he'll check the house, ask questions, look for proof we're actually married and not just playing games to get around his rules." "What kind of proof?" "The kind I can't fake in one night." Hale's face was hard in the lamplight. "So we tell him the truth. We're married, you're here, that's all he needs to know. You don't have to like me, you don't have to pretend we're in love. You just have to not contradict me when I say we're following the law." "And after he leaves?" "After he leaves, you do what you want. Stay, go, I don't care. But if you leave before the verification, the registration becomes void and you go to the work camps. Those are the rules." Eliza felt exhaustion settling into her bones. "I'm not going anywhere." Something flickered in Hale's expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. But it disappeared before she could be sure. "Then we understand each other. Good night, Mrs. Hale." He walked into his room and closed the door. Mrs. Hale. Eliza stood in the main room, listening to the silence of the mountain night. Crickets outside, the creak of old wood settling, the distant hoot of an owl. No voices, no laughter, no mockery. She went to her room and found it exactly as he'd described. Simple, clean, functional. A bed with a quilt that looked handmade. A wood stove that someone had already loaded with kindling. A small window that probably looked out on nothing but trees. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself cry. Not from sadness or fear, but from a relief so profound it felt like pain. Nobody was watching her. Nobody was laughing. For the first time in her life, she was somewhere nobody had to look at her at all. She fell asleep, still dressed, too tired to care. Morning came with cold gray light filtering through the window. Eliza woke to the sound of an axe hitting wood, steady, rhythmic, methodical. She sat up, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. She dressed quickly and went outside. Hale was splitting wood in the yard, working through a pile of logs that would have taken Eliza a week to finish. He'd already created a stack of split wood taller than she was. He didn't acknowledge her, just kept swinging the axe with mechanical precision. "Is there coffee?" she asked. "Pot's on the stove. Should still be warm." Eliza went back inside and found he was right. A battered pot sat on the wood stove, half full of coffee that was more mud than liquid. She poured a cup and drank it standing at the window, watching Hale work. He moved like a man who was angry at the wood. Each swing carried a violence that suggested he was working out something internal. The axe came down like a judgment. She was still watching when a rider appeared on the trail. Cutler, arriving right on schedule. Hale saw him too. He drove the axe into the chopping block and wiped his hands on his pants. "Stay close," he said as he passed Eliza. "Don't volunteer anything." Cutler dismounted with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, Hale. Mrs. Hale." He nodded at Eliza. "Lovely day for a verification visit. Let's get this over with." Hale's voice was flat. Now, no need to be unwelcoming." Cutler pulled out his ledger. "Just need to confirm a few things, make sure everything's legitimate. The territorial governor's very concerned about fraud, you understand. Can't have people gaming the system." "We're not gaming anything." "Of course not, but I still need to verify." Cutler turned to Eliza. "So, Mrs. Hale, how was your first night as a married woman?" The question felt like a trap. Eliza glanced at Hale, but his face gave nothing away. "Fine." "Just fine?" Cutler's eyebrows rose. "Not what I'd hoped to hear from a new bride." "She's tired," Hale said. "Long ride yesterday." I'm sure." Cutler made a note. "Mind if I look around? Just want to make sure the living arrangements are appropriate." "Knock yourself out." They followed Cutler into the house. He made a show of examining everything, the kitchen, the bedrooms, the privy out back. He opened drawers, looked in closets, inspected the sheets on both beds. "I see you have separate rooms," he said. "For now." Hale's voice carried a warning. "That a problem?" No. Territorial law doesn't specify sleeping arrangements. Just want to make sure this is a genuine marriage and not some arrangement to avoid community responsibilities." "It's genuine." "Is it?" Cutler turned to Eliza. "What about you, Mrs. Hale? Do you feel this is a genuine marriage?" Eliza met his eyes. She'd spent her whole life being interrogated by men who thought they knew better than her. "I signed the paper. I'm here. What else do you need?" "A bit of enthusiasm would be nice." "I'm enthusiastic about not being in a work camp." Cutler's smile tightened. "You know, Hale, most men want wives who are grateful for their situation. You sure you made the right choice?" "Positive. Because if this doesn't work out, if she runs off or you decide to send her back, she's not going anywhere." Hale moved closer to Eliza, a subtle shift that put him between her and Cutler. "We're following the law. That's what you wanted. Now sign your verification and leave." Cutler studied them for a long moment. Eliza forced herself to stay still, to not react, to give him nothing. Finally, he shrugged and scribbled in his ledger. "Fine. You're verified. Officially married in the eyes of the territory." He snapped the book shut. "I'll be back in 6 months for a follow-up. Make sure things are still, legitimate." "Can't wait," Hale said. They watched Cutler ride away in silence. Only when he disappeared down the trail did Hale relax slightly. 6 months, Eliza said. "He's bluffing. There's no law requiring follow-up visits." "But he'll come anyway." "Probably." Hale walked back toward the woodpile. "Doesn't matter. He saw what he needed to see." "Which was what?" "That I made a choice and I'm sticking with it." Hale picked up the axe. "You don't have to stay 6 months. Soon as you've got a plan, you can leave." "Where would I go?" He shrugged. "Not my problem." The words should have stung, but they didn't. They were honest, at least. Eliza had spent her life hearing pretty lies from people who wanted her to go away quietly. Hale's bluntness felt almost refreshing. "If I stay," she said, "I work. I don't take charity. Hale paused mid-swing. This isn't charity. Then what is it? A transaction. You need a place. I need Cutler off my back. That's it. Then I work, Eliza repeated. What needs doing? Hale lowered the axe and looked at her for the first time since yesterday. Really looked, like he was seeing her instead of seeing through her. His expression was hard to read. You know anything about ranching? He asked. No. Cooking? Not well. Sewing, cleaning, any of the things most women know? I can clean. Everything else I can learn. Hale was quiet for a moment. Then, barn needs mucking. Haven't gotten to it in a while. Tools are by the door. It wasn't a warm welcome, but it also wasn't a rejection. Eliza took it as the peace offering it was and headed for the barn. The smell hit her first. Horses, hay, manure. Not terrible, just strong. The barn was bigger than she'd realized in the dark, with stalls for 6 horses, though only 2 were occupied. The black horse from yesterday and a gray mare who watched Eliza with intelligent eyes. She found a shovel and a wheelbarrow and got to work. It was hard labor, harder than anything she'd done in the city. Her hands blistered within an hour. Her back ached, but there was something satisfying about the simple concrete nature of it. Muck the stall, haul it away, spread fresh straw. Results you could see. She was halfway through the second stall when Hale appeared in the doorway. You missed a spot, he said, then left before she could respond. Eliza looked at the stall. It was clean. Hale was messing with her. She went back to work with something that might have been a smile. By midday, she'd finished all 6 stalls and her hands were bleeding. She washed them at the pump, hissing at the sting, then went inside. Hale sat at the table with papers spread out in front of him, bills, receipts, ledgers. He glanced up when she entered. You're bleeding. I noticed. He got up and pulled a tin from a high shelf. Salve. Use it unless you want infection. The salve smelled terrible but took the sting away. Eliza wrapped her hands in strips of cloth and sat down across from him. What are you doing? She asked. Books, ranch accounts. You do your own accounting? Who else would do it? He made a note in the ledger, his handwriting surprisingly neat. Can't exactly hire someone when you're 3 hours from town. I could do it. Hale looked up, skeptical. You know accounting? I worked in a factory in the city, kept their production records for 2 years before they decided my face was bad for morale and let me go. The bitterness crept into her voice despite her best efforts. I'm good with numbers. Hale studied her, then pushed the ledger across the table. Show me. Eliza pulled it closer and scanned the pages. His system was functional, but inefficient. He tracked every transaction separately instead of summarizing by category. It made it hard to see patterns or plan ahead. You're losing money on feed, she said after a few minutes. What? Here, she pointed. You're buying hay from Miller's Feed every month at 70 cents a bale. But Johnson's farm sells the same quality hay at 55 cents if you buy in bulk. Over a year, that's... She did the math in her head. $43 you're wasting. Hale leaned forward, looking at where she'd pointed. How do you know Johnson's prices? I don't. I'm guessing based on the notation here that says J-Farm quote, with 55 written next to it. You got a quote from them but kept buying from Miller's anyway. Johnson's farm is farther. Extra hour's ride saves you $43. Seems worth it. Hale sat back, something shifting in his expression. What else? They spent the next 2 hours going through the books. Eliza found half a dozen places where he was overpaying, underselling, or simply not tracking expenses properly. By the time they finished, she'd reorganized his entire system. You're good at this, Hale said finally. I told you I was. Most people tell me things. Most of them are lying. I don't lie. Eliza met his eyes. I don't see the point. People already think the worst of me. Might as well give them the truth. Something flickered across Hale's face. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. He knew what it was like to have people assume the worst. The books are yours, he said. If you want them. I do. Then they're yours. He stood up. I've got fence to fix before dark. There's salt pork and beans in the larder if you get hungry. Help yourself. He left before she could respond. Eliza sat alone at the table, surrounded by papers and numbers, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Useful. The days developed a rhythm. Hale worked outside, fixing fences, tending cattle, maintaining equipment. Eliza worked inside and in the barn, keeping the house clean, managing the books, learning ranch work through trial and error. They spoke rarely and never about anything personal. They were business partners, nothing more. But slowly, things changed. Hale started leaving tools where she could reach them without asking. She started making enough coffee for both of them. He showed her how to saddle a horse. She showed him how to reorganize the supply shed for better efficiency. They didn't talk about it. They just adapted. 3 weeks in, Eliza woke to find snow falling. Not a lot, just a dusting that turned the pines white and made the world look clean. She stood at the window watching it, mesmerized. She'd seen snow in the city, but never like this. Never where it looked beautiful instead of just cold. First mountain snow? Hale's voice came from behind her. She jumped, not having heard him get up. Yes. Better get used to it. We get storms up here that can last for days, need to stock up before the hard winter hits. When's that? Month? Maybe 6 weeks? He moved to the stove and started building a fire. We'll need to go to town for supplies. Flour, coffee, feed, things we can't make it through winter without. When? Today, if the weather holds. They left mid-morning, taking a wagon this time instead of the horse. The ride was slower but more stable. Eliza found herself relaxing as they descended from the mountain, watching the world wake up around them. You miss it? Hale asked suddenly. Miss what? The city, people, noise. Eliza thought about it. No, I miss the library sometimes, but not the rest of it. You read? When I could. It was free and nobody cared what I looked like as long as I was quiet. Hale nodded, like that made perfect sense. They rode in silence after that, but it felt different than before. Less like avoidance and more like comfort. Stillwater Ridge looked the same as the last time, dusty, crowded, loud. Eliza felt people's eyes on her immediately. The woman who'd been chosen by Hale, the one nobody else wanted. Ignore them, Hale said quietly. I always do. Well, they went to the general store first. Eliza had a list, Hale's list technically, but she'd reorganized it by priority and price point. The shopkeeper, a portly man named Henderson, looked surprised to see her. Mrs. Hale, didn't expect you back. Didn't expect to stay, Eliza said evenly. But here we are. Henderson glanced at Hale, who was examining harness equipment in the back. He treating you well? He's treating me fairly. That's more than I expected. Henderson seemed to accept that. He filled their order efficiently, even throwing in an extra pound of coffee at no charge. For the newlyweds, he said with a smile that seemed genuine. They were loading the wagon when Cutler appeared. Well, well, the happy couple returns. His voice dripped with false cheer. How's married life treating you, Hale? Fine. Hale didn't look up from securing the supplies. And you, Mrs. Hale? Still enthusiastic about not being in a work camp? Eliza turned to face him. She'd dealt with men like Cutler her entire life, men who thought her lack of beauty gave them permission to mock her. More enthusiastic every day. That's so. Cutler stepped closer. Because I've been hearing interesting things. People saying they see Hale come to town alone. Saying his wife never shows her face makes a man wonder if she's even still there. I'm right here. Today you are. But I've got a responsibility to make sure these marriages are legitimate. Can't have men gaming the system, claiming wives they don't have just to avoid community obligations. You verified us yourself. Hale's voice had gone quiet and dangerous. 3 weeks ago. And I'll verify you again in 6 months, like I said. But if I hear troubling reports before then, you'll what? Hale moved forward, putting himself between Cutler and Eliza. Show up at my ranch and harass us again? Invent new regulations to justify your existence? Or maybe you'll just admit what this is really about. Cutler's face flushed. Careful, Hale. You've been trying to force me off that land since you got appointed. Every regulation, every tax increase, every community requirement, all aimed at making me leave so you can sell the property to your friends from back east. This marriage verification is just another angle. That's a serious accusation. It's just the truth. Hale's hands were fists at his sides. And you know it. People had stopped to watch. Cutler looked around at the gathering crowd, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. We'll continue this conversation later. No, we won't. We're done talking. You verified our marriage. That's all the law requires. Now leave us alone. Cutler opened his mouth, then closed it again. He turned and walked away, his back stiff with anger. Hale stood frozen for a moment, then let out a long breath. Let's go. They finished loading in silence and left town quickly. Only when they were back in the trees did Eliza speak. Thank you. For what? For standing up for me. Most people don't. Hale was quiet for a long moment. You're my wife. Legally, at least. That means something. Does it? To me it does. He glanced at her sideways. I don't go back on my word. I chose you. That makes you mine to protect. The phrasing should have bothered her. Mine to protect, like property. But somehow it didn't. Maybe because she knew Hale didn't mean it that way. Or maybe because protection was something she'd never had before. They returned to the ranch as twilight settled over the mountains. Hale unloaded while Eliza started dinner. Real dinner this time, not just warmed-up leftovers. She'd bought vegetables in town, and she made a stew that actually tasted like something. Hale ate 3 bowls without comment, which Eliza decided to take as a compliment. Tomorrow, he said as he finished, I need to move the cattle to winter pasture. It's a 2-day job, minimum. Maybe 3. You want help? He looked surprised. You ever worked cattle? No, but I can learn. Hale studied her, and Eliza could see him calculating the risk of taking someone inexperienced versus the benefit of having help. It's hard work. Long days in the saddle, cold nights camping rough. I can handle it. Can you? There was no mockery in the question, just genuine curiosity. Only one way to find out. Hale almost smiled. Almost. All right, we leave at dawn. Dress warm. They left the next morning as promised, driving 60 head of cattle toward higher ground where winter grazing was better. Eliza rode the gray mare, a gentle horse that tolerated her inexperience, while Hale worked the herd on the black. It was brutal. The cattle didn't want to move. The trail was steep and treacherous, and Eliza's inexperience showed constantly. But Hale was patient in his own rough way, showing her how to position herself, when to push, and when to back off. He didn't coddle her, but he didn't expect perfection either. By the time they made camp that first night, Eliza was so sore she could barely walk. Hale noticed but didn't comment, just handed her a tin cup of coffee and pointed at the fire. Beans are in the pan. Help yourself. They ate in silence, watching the fire. Above them, stars filled the sky. More stars than Eliza had ever seen. In the city, you forgot stars existed. Out here, they were impossible to ignore. It's beautiful, she said softly. Hale looked up. Yeah, it is. Is this why you live up here? For this? Part of it. He poked at the fire with a stick. Mostly I just don't like people. Can't blame you for that. He glanced at her, something shifting in his expression. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. What did you expect? Eliza thought about it. Cruelty or indifference. Men who've chosen me before, and there weren't many, always made sure I knew I was a last resort. You don't do that. What would be the point? Hale shrugged. You are what you are. I am what I am. Might as well make it work. It was the most practical approach to marriage Eliza had ever heard, and somehow that made it better than any romantic declaration. They finished moving the cattle the next day. It was hard work made harder by a sudden storm that blew in from nowhere, turning the trail to mud and the cattle into panicked chaos. But they got through it together, Eliza learning to trust her horse and Hale learning to trust Eliza. When they finally got home, both of them were exhausted and filthy. Hale showed Eliza how to work the pump for a proper wash, then disappeared to tend the horses while she cleaned up. That night, she made the best dinner she could manage with their limited supplies. Hale ate without comment, but when he finished, he said, "You did good out there, with the cattle." It was the closest thing to praise he'd given her. Eliza felt something warm settle in her chest. "Thank you. Tomorrow, I'll teach you to shoot." "Why?" "Because winter's coming and predators come down from higher elevations. Mountain lions, wolves, bears. If something comes at you, you need to be able to defend yourself. You won't be here? I'll be here. But I can't be everywhere. You need to know how to handle yourself. So the next day, Hale taught her to shoot. Not just how to hold a rifle or pull a trigger, but how to aim, how to breathe, how to make every shot count. He was demanding, but not harsh, correcting her mistakes without making her feel stupid. By the end of the week, Eliza could hit a target at 50 yards more often than not. Hale nodded approval when she got a good grouping, and Eliza found herself working harder just to see that nod. The days blurred together. Hale taught her to ride better, to rope, to read weather signs. Eliza reorganized his entire supply system, implemented a proper inventory method, and renegotiated his contracts with suppliers in town. They were building something, not romance, not friendship exactly, but something solid and real. One night, 6 weeks after the wedding, they sat at the table going over the books. Eliza had just shown him how much money her new system had saved. $47, Hale said, staring at the numbers. Over 2 months, so roughly $23 a month going forward. He looked at her, really looked, and Eliza saw something in his eyes she'd never seen directed at her before. Respect. You're good at this. Better than good. I told you I was. You did. He closed the ledger carefully. I want you to know, this arrangement, it's not just about Cutler anymore. You're useful here. More than useful. If you want to stay beyond the 6 months, you can. Eliza's throat went tight. You mean that? I don't say things I don't mean. Then yes, I want to stay. Hale nodded once, like they'd just agreed on a business deal. But Eliza saw the relief in his eyes, brief and quickly hidden. He wanted her to stay, not out of obligation, but because she belonged here. For the first time in her life, Eliza felt like she belonged somewhere. Winter came hard and fast after that. The first real storm hit in early November, dumping 3 feet of snow in 2 days. Eliza woke to a world transformed, white and silent and impossibly beautiful. Hale was already up, clearing paths to the barn and the woodshed. She grabbed a shovel and joined him without being asked. They worked side by side, not talking, just shoveling in rhythm. When they finished, Hale looked at her and said, "You're tougher than you look." Coming from him, it was high praise. The winter was hard, but they weathered it together. They settled into routines, learned each other's rhythms, built something that looked almost like partnership. They weren't romantic, weren't even particularly affectionate, but they were solid, reliable, together. And slowly, Eliza began to realize something terrifying. She was happy. Not the desperate, frantic happiness of escaping danger, not the brief satisfaction of a good day, but deep, lasting contentment. She woke up every morning knowing what needed to be done. She went to bed every night knowing she'd done it well. Nobody mocked her. Nobody looked through her. She was just enough. It was more than she had ever had before, more than she'd ever thought possible. Late one night in December, she found Hale sitting by the fire with a book. He looked up when she entered. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much coffee." He shifted over, making room on the bench. Eliza sat down, maintaining careful distance. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames. "Can I ask you something?" Eliza said finally. "You can ask. I might not answer. Why did you really choose me?" "The truth." Hale was quiet for a long time. Finally, "Because you looked like I felt." "What does that mean?" "Alone. Unwanted. Angry at a world that couldn't see past the surface." He stared into the fire. "I've been up on this mountain for 5 years. Before that, I was in the war, saw things, did things that changed me. When I came back, people looked at me different, like I was something dangerous that needed to be managed or avoided. So I came up here where nobody had to look at me at all. And you thought I felt the same way. I thought maybe you'd understand what it's like to be judged for things you can't control." He glanced at her. "Was I wrong?" "No." Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. "You weren't wrong." They sat together until the fire burned down to embers. And when they finally went to their separate rooms, something had shifted between them. They weren't just business partners anymore. They were allies. Winter deepened and the ranch became an island in a sea of white. Some days the snow fell so thick Eliza couldn't see the barn from the house. On those days, she and Hale worked inside, her with the books, him repairing tack and equipment. The silences between them grew comfortable, punctuated by the scrape of his knife on leather or the scratch of her pen on paper. January brought a cold snap that froze the water in the trough solid and made the cattle cluster together for warmth. Eliza learned to break ice with an axe, to check animals for frostbite, to read the subtle signs that meant a storm was building. Hale taught her without condescension, showing her once and then letting her figure it out. When she made mistakes, he corrected them matter-of-factly. When she got things right, he nodded and moved on. It was the most respect anyone had ever shown her. One morning in late January, Eliza woke to find Hale already dressed and checking his rifle. "Something wrong?" she asked. "Tracks outside. Big cat, looks like. Been circling the barn." Eliza's stomach tightened. She'd heard stories about mountain lions, how they could take down a full-grown cow, how they weren't afraid to go after people if they were hungry enough. "What do we do?" "We track it, make sure it's moved on." Hale loaded extra ammunition into his coat pocket. "You stay here." "No." He looked at her sharply. "This isn't a discussion." "You're right, it's not." Eliza grabbed her own coat. "You said I needed to learn to handle myself. Can't learn if I'm always hiding in the house. This is different. This is dangerous. So teach me how to handle dangerous." Hale's jaw worked like he was chewing on arguments. Finally, he grabbed a second rifle and thrust it at her. "You stay behind me. You don't fire unless I tell you to. And if I say run, you run. Understand?" "Yes." "I mean it, Eliza. You run and you don't look back." It was the first time he'd used her name. Not Mrs. Hale. Not you. Her actual name. The sound of it in his rough voice made something flutter in her chest. They followed the tracks into the trees, moving slowly through snow that came up to Eliza's knees. Hale walked ahead, reading signs she couldn't see. A depression here, a scratch mark there, dried blood on a rock that meant the cat had made a kill nearby. "It's still close," he said quietly. "Stay alert." They found the kill site 20 minutes later, a deer carcass, mostly eaten, hidden under a fallen log. The cat hadn't gone far. Mountain lions often stayed near their kills until they'd stripped them clean. "We should go back," Eliza whispered. "Not yet. Need to see which direction it went." Hale circled the area, studying tracks. "If it's heading away from the ranch, we leave it alone. If it's heading toward us," a sound behind them, low and threatening. Eliza's blood turned to ice. "Don't move," Hale said, his voice barely audible. "Don't turn around." "Rowan, I said don't move." She heard it then. The soft pad of paws on snow. The heavy breathing of something big and hungry. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stay still. "When I turn," Hale said quietly, "you're going to back away slow. Keep your rifle up, but don't aim at it unless it charges. Most of the time, they'll back down if you look big and make noise." "Most of the time?" "That's the best I can offer." He shifted his weight. "Ready?" "No." "Good enough." In one smooth motion, Hale turned and raised his rifle. "Go!" Eliza backed away, her rifle raised, and finally saw it, a massive tawny shape about 30 yards away, crouched low and staring at them with yellow eyes. It was bigger than she'd imagined, easily 200 pounds of muscle and teeth. "Get back!" Hale shouted at the cat. "Get!" The mountain lion didn't move. Its tail twitched, and Eliza knew enough from Hale's lessons to recognize what that meant. It was deciding whether to attack. "Rowan, keep backing up. Don't run." The cat took a step forward, then another. Hale fired into the air. The shot echoed through the trees, sharp and violent. The cat flinched, but didn't retreat. "It's not backing down," Eliza said, her voice shaking. "I can see that." Hale's rifle was now aimed directly at the animal. "If it charges, I shoot. You run. No arguments." "I'm not leaving you." "Eliza!" The cat charged. Hale fired. The first shot hit the cat's shoulder, spinning it sideways. It screamed, a sound like metal tearing, and kept coming. Hale fired again, and this time the bullet found its mark. The mountain lion collapsed mid-leap, hitting the snow 10 feet from where they stood. The silence after was deafening. Eliza stood frozen, her rifle still raised, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "You okay?" Hale's voice sounded distant. "I think so." He moved forward carefully, rifle trained on the cat. When he was sure it was dead, He lowered his weapon and let out a long breath. Close. Too close. Eliza's hands were shaking now that the danger had passed. You said most of the time they back down. Most of the time they do. Hale studied the carcass. This one was old. See the ribs showing? Probably couldn't catch healthy prey anymore. That's why it was so close to the ranch. Desperate. Desperate is dangerous. Always is. He looked at her. You did good. Didn't panic. I was terrified. Being scared and panicking are different things. You stayed calm. That's what matters. He pulled his knife and began field dressing the carcass. Pelt's not in great shape, but it's salvageable. Might get a few dollars for it in town. Eliza watched him work, still trying to process what had just happened. They'd been seconds away from death. If Hale had missed, if the cat had been faster, if any number of things had gone differently. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not making me stay at the house. Hale paused in his work. You need to learn. Can't protect you forever. Why would you want to protect me at all? He looked at her then, really looked, and Eliza saw something in his eyes she couldn't quite name. Because you're mine to protect. I told you that. I'm not property. No, you're not. He went back to his work. But you're my wife. That means something to me, even if it doesn't to you. The words hung between them, complicated and heavy. Eliza wanted to say that it did mean something to her, that somewhere in the last 3 months she'd stopped thinking of this as a temporary arrangement and started thinking of it as home. But the words stuck in her throat. They dragged the mountain lion back to the ranch in silence. Hale spent the rest of the day skinning it properly while Eliza checked on the cattle. By evening, the pelt was stretched and drying, and Hale was cleaning his rifle at the kitchen table. You hungry? Eliza asked. Always. She made stew with the last of their venison and fresh bread from the sourdough starter she'd been maintaining. Hale ate mechanically, his mind clearly elsewhere. What are you thinking about? She asked. That cat. How close it got without me noticing. You noticed in time. Barely. He set down his spoon. I'm getting careless. Used to, I'd have heard it long before it got that close. War taught me to stay alert, but I've gotten comfortable up here. Comfortable is dangerous. Or maybe you're just healing, Eliza said, getting past whatever the war did to you. Hale's expression hardened. Some things you don't get past. You could try. I have tried. His voice was sharp. You think I want to wake up every night hearing screams? You think I like jumping at sudden noises? I came up here because I couldn't function down there, surrounded by people who wanted me to just get over it and be normal again. Eliza had never heard him talk about the war. He'd mentioned it once, that night by the fire, but never with details. Now anger and pain radiated off him like heat. I wasn't suggesting you just get over it, she said carefully. I was suggesting maybe you're allowing yourself to be something other than constantly on guard. Being on guard keeps us alive. So does living. Hale stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm going to check the barn. He left before she could respond. Eliza sat alone at the table, listening to his boots crunch through the snow outside. She'd pushed too hard, said too much. Whatever progress they'd made, she'd just damaged it. But when Hale came back an hour later, he didn't go straight to his room. He stood in the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders, and said, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have snapped at you. Eliza looked up, surprised. I shouldn't have pushed. No, you should have. He moved to the fire and held his hands out to the warmth. I don't talk about it because talking makes it real. But maybe it needs to be real. Maybe that's the only way through. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. I know, but maybe I should anyway. He was quiet for a long moment. I was at Shiloh. First day. You hear about it? Some? Then you know it was bad. Worst fighting most of us had ever seen. I watched boys I'd grown up with die in mud so thick we couldn't pull them out. Watched a field hospital burn with wounded still inside because we couldn't get to them fast enough. His voice was flat, reciting facts. After that, everything was just trying not to die, trying to keep the men around me from dying. I got good at it, real good, but good wasn't good enough. By the end, I couldn't sleep without seeing their faces. Couldn't be around people without calculating exits and threats. Couldn't be normal. So you came here. So I came here. Built this place with my own hands, every board and nail. Thought if I worked hard enough, I could work it out of my system. He turned to look at her. Didn't work. I'm still broken. You're not broken, Eliza said. You're just different than you were. That's a kind way of saying it. It's the true way. She stood and moved closer. You think I don't understand? I spent my whole life being told I was broken because I didn't look right. That there was something wrong with me that needed fixing. But I'm not broken. I'm just me. Different than what people expected, but not broken. Hale studied her face like he was seeing her for the first time. When did you figure that out? About 2 months ago, when you handed me those account books and treated me like I might actually know what I was doing. You did know what you were doing. Yeah, but you didn't know that yet. You just gave me a chance. She held his gaze. Maybe you deserve the same thing. A chance to be who you are now instead of who you were before. Hale was silent for a long time. Finally, he nodded once. Maybe. It wasn't agreement exactly, but it wasn't rejection either. It was possibility, which was more than he'd allowed himself before. February came with a brief thaw that turned the snow to slush and made travel possible again. Hale decided they needed to go to town for supplies. They were running low on flour and coffee, and the cattle needed supplemental feed before spring. You coming? He asked Eliza. If you want me to. I'm asking because I want you to. They made the trip on a clear morning, the wagon loaded with furs Hale had trapped over the winter. The pelts would bring good money, enough to cover supplies and then some. Eliza had negotiated a better price with Henderson ahead of time through a letter, using her accounting skills to show him exactly how much profit he'd make by buying in bulk. Stillwater Ridge looked different in late winter, tired and gray, with mud everywhere and people moving with the slow deliberation of those who'd spent months cooped up. Eliza felt eyes on her as they rode through, but the attention felt different now. Less mockery, more curiosity. Henderson greeted them warmly, even shaking Eliza's hand. Mrs. Hale, good to see you again. Got your letter about the furs. You drive a hard bargain. Fair bargain, Eliza corrected. You make money, we make money. That's fair. Henderson laughed. Fair it is. Let me take a look at what you've got. While he examined the furs, Eliza handled the supply order. She'd learned Hale's preferences over the winter and knew exactly what they needed. Henderson nodded approval as she worked through the list. You're good at this, he said. Ever think about doing it professionally? I am doing it professionally. I manage Hale's accounts. I meant for other people. There are ranchers around here who could use someone with your skills. Most of them can barely write their own names, let alone keep proper books. Eliza glanced at Hale, who was examining new rope. I'll think about it. They were loading supplies when a woman approached, middle-aged, well-dressed, with a kind face. Excuse me, you're Mrs. Hale, aren't you? Eliza tensed, expecting trouble. I am. I'm Margaret Chen. I run the boarding house. She smiled. I wanted to introduce myself. It's nice to see another woman establishing herself out here. Thank you. I mean it. I've heard good things. Henderson says you're a miracle with accounts, and the Miller boys say your husband's cattle came through winter better than anyone else's. That's no small feat. Eliza felt something warm spread through her chest. We've been lucky. Luck has nothing to do with it. That's skill and hard work. Margaret lowered her voice. I also wanted to say I was there, at the platform, when you arrived. The warmth disappeared, replaced by cold dread. Oh. I wanted to apologize. For the crowd, for the cruelty. You didn't deserve that. Eliza didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever apologized for that day. I know it doesn't change anything, Margaret continued, but I wanted you to know that not everyone here is like Cutler and his cronies. Some of us were ashamed of what happened, and we're glad you're doing well. Eliza's throat was tight. Thank you. That means more than you know. Margaret squeezed her hand and walked away. Eliza stood frozen, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. You okay? Hale appeared at her elbow. Yeah, I'm fine. Who was that? Someone apologizing for things that weren't her fault. Eliza shook her head. Can we go? I'm ready to be home. Home. The word slipped out naturally, without thought. But it was true. The ranch wasn't just where she lived anymore. It was home. They were halfway back when they encountered trouble. A wagon broken down in the middle of the trail, a man cursing as he tried to fix a shattered wheel, and a woman holding a crying baby while a small boy clung to her skirts. "Need help?" Hale called. The man looked up, young, maybe 25, with the raw look of someone new to frontier life. "Wheel's broken clean through. I've got no spare, and we're 3 hours from anywhere." Hale examined the damage. "Can't fix this, but we can give you a ride. Where are you headed?" "Miller's Creek, got a homestead there." "That's an hour past our place." Hale looked at Eliza. She could see him calculating, their supplies, the weight limit, the inconvenience. "We'll take you," Eliza said before he could decide. "All of you." The man's relief was palpable. "Thank you. Thank you so much." They rearranged the wagon, making room for the family and their most essential belongings. The rest would have to be retrieved later. The baby kept crying, a thin wail that spoke of hunger or cold or both. The mother looked exhausted. "When did she last eat?" Eliza asked. "This morning. I'm trying to nurse, but my milk's not coming in right." The woman's eyes were desperate. "I don't know what to do. We have goat's milk at the ranch. Not ideal, but better than nothing." "You'd do that?" "Of course." The woman started crying, which set the baby off again. The little boy buried his face in his mother's coat. Hale drove in silence, his jaw set. When they reached the ranch, Eliza took charge. She settled the family in the main room, got the fire going, and heated goat's milk while Hale unhitched the horses. The baby took to the milk immediately, guzzling it down with desperate efficiency. "I'm Sarah," the woman said. "This is my husband, Tom, and our children, Mary and James. Eliza, and that's my husband, Rowan. We can't thank you enough. If you hadn't come along, but we did." Eliza handed Tom a cup of coffee. "You're new to the territory?" 3 months. Bought the homestead site unseen back east. Thought we'd make a fresh start." Tom's laugh was bitter. "Turns out fresh starts are harder than they look." "They are," Hale said from the doorway. "But they're possible. You've just got to be willing to work." They spent the evening helping the family, feeding them, warming them, giving them a place to rest. By the time they were ready to continue to Miller's Creek, it was too dark and too dangerous. They'd have to stay the night. "You can have my room," Eliza told Sarah. "The baby will sleep better in a real bed." "Where will you sleep?" "I'll figure something out." After everyone had settled in for the night, Sarah and the baby in Eliza's room, Tom and James on the floor by the fire, Hale in his room, Eliza found herself standing in the kitchen with nowhere to go. She'd given up her bed without thinking, and now she realized she had no plan. "You can take my bed," Hale said quietly. He'd appeared from his room, still fully dressed. "I'll sleep out here." "Don't be ridiculous. I'm the one who gave up my room. And I'm not letting you sleep on the floor." "So we're both noble and both uncomfortable. Great plan." Hale almost smiled. "The bed's big enough for 2, if you don't mind." Eliza's heart kicked against her ribs. "I don't mind." They went to his room in awkward silence. The bed was indeed big, a massive frame Hale had probably built himself. Eliza had never been in his room before. It was spare like the rest of the house, but there were personal touches. A photograph on the dresser of a woman who must be his mother, a knife collection on the wall, books stacked by the bed. "Which side do you want?" Hale asked. "I don't care." "Left then. I sleep on the right." They settled in with careful distance between them, both fully clothed, both staring at the ceiling. The bed was warm from the heated stones Hale kept under the mattress. Outside, the wind howled. "You did a good thing today," Hale said into the darkness. "Helping that family. We both did. I wouldn't have stopped if you hadn't been there. Would have figured it wasn't my problem. But you stopped because I asked." "Yeah." He shifted and the bed creaked. "You're making me better. More like I used to be before the war. More human." "You were always human." "Didn't feel like it." Eliza turned her head to look at him. In the darkness, she could just make out his profile. Strong nose, sharp jaw, the shadow of stubble. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What happens when the 6 months are up? When Cutler comes back?" Hale was quiet for a long time. "What do you want to happen?" "I want to stay, But I don't know if you want me to. I do. The words came quick, like he'd been holding them back. I want you to stay. Not because of Cutler, not because you're useful with the books. I want you to stay because I like having you here. Eliza's breath caught. I like being here. Then stay. As what? Your employee? Your business partner? As my wife. Hale rolled onto his side to face her. For real this time. Not a transaction, not an arrangement. A real marriage. We barely know each other. Oh, I know you're strong and smart, and you don't take any of my nonsense. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you make this place feel less lonely. His voice was rough. I know when I wake up, the first thing I think about is whether you're awake yet. And when I'm out working, I'm thinking about whether you're warm enough, safe enough, whether you need anything. That's not business. That's something else. Eliza's eyes burned. I think about you too. Whether you're eating enough, working too hard. Whether the ghosts from the war are bothering you. Whether you're happy. I'm happier than I've been in 5 years. So am I. They lay there in the darkness, facing each other, the space between them suddenly feeling very small. Can I kiss you? Hale asked. Yes. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. But Eliza didn't want to change her mind. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted the thing they'd been building to become something more. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like they were learning a new language, then deeper, more certain. Hale's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. Eliza reached for him, her fingers tangling in his shirt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Hale rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Please. I'm not going anywhere. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the space between them finally gone. Morning came with weak winter sunlight and the sound of the baby crying. Eliza woke slowly, warm and comfortable, pressed against Hale's chest. His arm was around her waist, holding her close even in sleep. She stayed still for a moment, savoring it. Then reality intruded. They had guests, responsibilities, a family to help get to their homestead. Rowan, she whispered. He woke instantly, that soldier's reflex she'd noticed before. His eyes found hers and softened. Morning. We have to get up. I know. But he didn't let go. One more minute. They took their minute, then rose and faced the day. By noon, they'd helped Tom fix his wagon wheel. Hale had a spare that would work temporarily and sent the family on their way with supplies and directions. Sarah hugged Eliza before they left. You saved us. I won't forget this. Just help someone else when you can. That's payment enough. After they left, the ranch felt quiet again. Eliza and Hale worked through their usual chores, but something had changed. They moved differently around each other, closer, more aware. When their hands brushed passing tools, they lingered. When their eyes met across the yard, they smiled. That night, without discussion, they went to Hale's room together. And this time there was no awkwardness, no uncertainty. Just two people choosing each other. Over the following weeks, they settled into their new reality. Days were still filled with hard work, fixing equipment, tending cattle, managing supplies. But nights were theirs, filled with quiet conversation and growing intimacy. They learned each other slowly, carefully, building something real from the ashes of what had been forced. March brought the first signs of spring, snow melting in earnest, ice breaking up in the creek, the cattle getting restless for new grass. It also brought Cutler. He arrived unannounced one morning, his horse clattering into the yard while Eliza was hanging laundry. She saw him coming and felt her stomach drop. Hale, she called. Rowan came out of the barn, saw Cutler, and his expression went flat. You're early. Just making rounds, checking on our new settlers. Cutler dismounted with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. How's married life treating you? Fine. That's good, real good. Cutler pulled out his ledger. Mind if I look around? Just need to verify everything's still legitimate. We went through this already. That was a preliminary check. This is the official 6-month verification. Cutler's smile widened. New territorial regulation. Just came through last week. All marriages performed under the Settlement Act need to be re-verified to ensure they're not fraudulent. That's not a real regulation, Eliza said. Cutler turned to her. Excuse me? There's no such regulation. I've read the entire Settlement Act and every amendment. There's nothing about 6-month re-verification. Well, maybe you misread. I didn't misread. You're making this up. Eliza stepped forward. Just like you made up half the requirements you've been using to harass us. Cutler's face flushed. Careful, Mrs. Hale. You're in a precarious position. No, I'm not. I'm married to a landowner with a legitimate claim. My position is solid. Yours is the one built on lies and intimidation. Is that so? Cutler's voice went cold, because I could make things very difficult for both of you. Try it, Rowan said quietly. He'd moved to stand beside Eliza, close enough that their shoulders touched. I'd love to see you explain to the territorial governor why you're harassing tax-paying citizens. The governor listens to me. The governor listens to whoever's in his ear last. And I know people too. People who fought with me, who owe me favors. You want to start a fight, Cutler? I'll finish it. The two men stared at each other. Eliza could feel the tension crackling between them like static before a storm. This isn't over, Cutler finally said. Yeah, it is. Rowan's voice was steel. You've verified our marriage twice now. That's twice more than the law requires. You come back here again without a legitimate reason, I'll file a harassment complaint, and I'll make sure everyone in the territory knows exactly what you've been doing. Cutler's jaw worked. Then he mounted his horse and rode away without another word. Eliza let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That was stupid, Rowan finished. I just made an enemy. You already had an enemy. Now he knows you're not backing down. We're not backing down. He looked at her. You stood up to him too. Somebody had to call him on his nonsense. Rowan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. We're in this together now. For real. For real, Eliza agreed. But even as she said it, she knew Cutler wouldn't give up. Men like him never did. They just found new angles, new ways to attack. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. 3 weeks after Cutler's visit, a rider appeared on the trail carrying official territorial mail. Rowan signed for the envelope and read it standing in the yard. His face going still in that way Eliza had learned meant trouble. What is it? She asked. He handed her the letter without speaking. Eliza scanned it quickly, her stomach sinking with each line. New territorial mandate, effective immediately. All marriages performed under the Settlement Act within the past year must be validated through formal testimony before a territorial magistrate. Failure to appear would result in automatic annulment and remand of unattached women to territorial labor assignments. Labor camps, Eliza said flatly. He's calling them labor assignments now, but that's what they are. It's dated 2 days ago. Hearing is in 3 weeks. Rowan took the letter back, staring at it like he could burn holes through it with his eyes. Cutler's behind this. Has to be. Can he do that? Just create new regulations? If he convinced the territorial governor it's necessary, yeah. Rowan crumpled the letter. And the governor's a political appointee who doesn't know anything about frontier life. Cutler probably told him there's rampant fraud, that men are gaming the system, that strong measures are needed. Governor signs off, suddenly it's law. Eliza felt cold despite the spring sunshine. What happens at the hearing? They'll ask questions about how we met, how long we've been married, whether the marriage is legitimate. They'll look for inconsistencies, anything that suggests we're not really together. But we are together, really together now. Yeah, but we weren't at first, and if they dig into that, if they ask the right questions… Rowan stopped, his jaw tight. Cutler knows we started as a transaction. He was there. He'll use that against us. So we tell the truth, that it started one way and became something else. You think they'll believe that? Rowan's voice was sharp with frustration. You think a territorial magistrate will hear we started fake, but now we're real, and just accept it? What choice do we have? I don't know. He turned away, staring at the mountains. Maybe you should just go. Leave before the hearing. You could head east, find work in a real city where Cutler can't touch you. No. Eliza, I said no. She moved to stand in front of him, forcing him to look at her. I'm not running, and I'm not letting Cutler win. This isn't about winning, it's about keeping you safe. I am safe. Here, with you. She grabbed his shirt, frustrated that he couldn't see what was obvious to her. I'm not leaving, Rowan. Not because of Cutler, Not because of some fake hearing. This is my home. You're my husband. I'm staying. Something in his expression cracked. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I can't lose you. You won't. But even as she said it, Eliza felt fear coiling in her gut. Cutler had found a way to threaten them that was legal, official, impossible to fight head on. And he knew exactly where to strike, at the weakness in their foundation, the truth that would damn them if it came out wrong. That night, they lay in bed trying to plan. Rowan outlined what he knew about territorial hearings, formal proceedings, sworn testimony, magistrates who had wide discretion to make rulings. Eliza took mental notes, already thinking about how to frame their story. We need to be consistent, she said. No contradictions. They'll try to trip us up with timeline questions, asking when things happened and in what order. What do we say about the platform? About how we met? The truth, mostly. You chose me from the platform because you needed a wife to satisfy territorial requirements. I agreed because the alternative was a work camp. That's all documented anyway. Cutler has records. And then what? When do we say it became real? Eliza thought about it. Gradually, over the winter, we started as strangers fulfilling an obligation, but working together every day depending on each other for survival. That built something real. It's not romantic, but it's true. And it's believable. You think they'll accept that? I think it's our best shot. She rolled over to face him. Unless you have a better idea. No, but I don't like gambling with your freedom. It's my freedom to gamble with. They practiced their story over the following days, going through potential questions and making sure their answers aligned. When did you first realize you had real feelings? What specific moment made this more than an arrangement? Can you describe your daily life together? It felt wrong, rehearsing their marriage like it was a performance. But Eliza knew that's exactly what the hearing would be. A performance where the stakes were everything. Spring advanced quickly after that. The snow melted entirely, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. The cattle spread out across the range, and Rowan spent long days riding fence lines and checking on new calves. Eliza managed everything else, the books, the house, correspondence with suppliers in town. She'd started taking on work for other ranchers, just like Henderson had suggested. Word had spread that Hale's wife was good with numbers, and suddenly Eliza was getting requests to help sort out accounts, negotiate contracts, organize inventory. She charged fair rates and did good work, and within a month she had more business than she could handle. You're building a reputation, Rowan said one evening, watching her work through another rancher's messy ledgers. Is that a problem? No, it's good. Means you have value beyond being my wife. If something happens at the hearing, nothing's going to happen. But if it does, you'd have skills people will pay for. Options. Eliza set down her pen. I don't want options. I want this. Us. I know, I'm just saying it. Stop planning for me to leave. It's not helping. Rowan fell silent, but she could see the worry in his eyes. He'd been like this since the letter arrived, tense, withdrawn, expecting disaster. The war had taught him that good things didn't last, and he was waiting for the next blow. A week before the hearing, they rode to town for supplies. The trip felt different now, shadowed by what was coming. People in Stillwater Ridge had heard about the new mandate. News traveled fast in small communities, and their reactions varied. Some were sympathetic, others seemed to think it was deserved, that anyone marrying under the Settlement Act should expect scrutiny. Henderson pulled Eliza aside while Rowan was loading feed. I heard about the hearing. Want you to know I'll testify if you need me. About the work you've done, your character, anything that'll help. Thank you. That means a lot. You're good people, both of you. This thing Cutler's doing, it's not right. He's got a personal grudge, and he's using his position to pursue it. Can you prove that? Not in a way that would matter to a magistrate. It's all plausible deniability with him. But everyone here knows what he is. Henderson glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard. Watch yourself in that hearing. Cutler's going to have people there, witnesses who'll say whatever he wants them to say. He's been asking around town about you two, digging for dirt. He won't find any. Won't stop him from inventing some. Henderson squeezed her shoulder. Just be careful. They left town with Eliza's mind spinning. Witnesses against them, people willing to lie to help Cutler. The hearing was already rigged before it started. "We should talk to a lawyer," she said on the ride back. "With what money? Lawyers cost more than we have." "Then we represent ourselves." Against a territorial magistrate who probably already has his mind made up? Rowan's voice was bitter. "This is a show trial, Eliza. Cutler wants to discredit us publicly, and the hearing is his stage. So we don't give him the show he wants. We stay calm, stick to our story, and make him look like the petty tyrant he is." "And if that doesn't work?" Eliza didn't answer. Because she didn't have an answer. They could do everything right and still lose. That was the reality of fighting power with nothing but truth. The night before the hearing, neither of them slept well. Eliza kept going over their story, checking for holes. Rowan paced the house like a caged animal, too restless to sit still. Around midnight, he finally came to bed and pulled her close. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said quietly, "I want you to know this wasn't fake, not the part that mattered. I know. I mean it. When I chose you on that platform, maybe it was just to get Cutler off my back. But everything after, that was real. Learning to trust you, to rely on you, to need you. That was all real." Eliza's throat went tight. "For me, too. If they separate us, if they send you away, they won't. But if they do, I'll fight it. I'll appeal, get lawyers, make noise until someone listens. You won't end up in a labor camp, I promise you that. We'll fight it together, because we're going to walk out of that hearing still married." Rowan kissed her like he was trying to memorize the feel of her mouth, the taste of her skin. They made love with a desperation that came from knowing everything could change tomorrow. And when they finally fell asleep in the early morning hours, they held on to each other like letting go meant drowning. They arrived at the territorial office in Stillwater Ridge an hour before the scheduled hearing. The building was intimidating, 2 stories of stone and timber, with territorial flags hanging from the facade and armed guards at the door. This was serious, official, the full weight of government power. Inside, a clerk directed them to a waiting room where 3 other couples sat in nervous silence. Eliza recognized one of them, Sarah and Tom, the young family they'd helped during winter. Sarah's eyes lit up when she saw them. "Eliza, I didn't know you were going through this too. New mandate covers everyone married in the past year. It's terrifying. They're treating us like criminals." Sarah bounced the baby, Mary, now noticeably bigger, on her knee. "What if they decide we're not legitimate? Where would we even go?" "Don't think like that," Tom said, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged 5 years since winter. Before Eliza could respond, the clerk called the first couple. They went in looking scared and came out 20 minutes later looking destroyed. The woman was crying. The man's face was gray. "They annulled us," he said to no one in particular. "Said we didn't have sufficient proof of a genuine marriage. She has to report to a labor assignment center within 3 days." The woman's crying intensified. They left quickly, and the remaining couples looked at each other with growing dread. Sarah and Tom were called next. They were inside for 40 minutes. When they emerged, Tom was holding Sarah's arm like she might collapse. But they weren't crying. "Provisional acceptance," Tom said. "They have questions, but they're giving us 6 more months to prove legitimacy. Another hearing then." It was better than annulment, but not much. 6 months of uncertainty, of waiting for the axe to fall. Then it was Rowan and Eliza's turn. The hearing room was smaller than she'd expected, but more formal. A large table at one end where 3 people sat, 2 men and a woman, all dressed in official territorial garb. The magistrate in the center was maybe 50, with iron gray hair and the kind of face that gave away nothing. To his right sat a younger man taking notes. To his left sat the woman, watching everything with sharp eyes. And standing to the side, smiling slightly, was Cutler. "Mr. and Mrs. Hale," the magistrate said. "Please sit." They took the chairs facing the table. Eliza's heart hammered, but she kept her face calm. Beside her, Rowan sat perfectly still, that soldier's discipline taking over. "I'm Magistrate Brennan. This is Clerk Foster and Examiner Walsh." He gestured to the note-taker and the woman. "We're here to verify the legitimacy of your marriage per Territorial Mandate 47B. Do you understand the proceedings?" "Yes," Rowan said. "Good. Let's begin." Brennan opened a folder. "You were married on October 17th of last year. Is that correct? Yes. Through the Settlement Act platform process? Yes. Mr. Hale, can you explain why you chose to participate in that process? Rowan's jaw tightened. I was told by Agent Cutler that my continued non-participation in community activities would result in increased scrutiny of my land claim and potential tax penalties. Marrying under the Settlement Act satisfied the participation requirement. So you married to avoid penalties. I married to comply with territorial expectations. Not for love. Not initially, no. Brennan made a note. And you, Mrs. Hale, why did you agree to this marriage? The alternative was a territorial work camp. I agreed because it was the better option. So neither of you married for traditional reasons. You, he pointed at Rowan, married to avoid hassles, and you, to Eliza, married to avoid hard labor. Initially, yes, Eliza said, but circumstances change, intentions evolve. Do they? Examiner Walsh spoke for the first time. Or do people just tell convenient stories when pressed? We're not telling stories, we're telling the truth. Are you? Walsh pulled out papers. I have testimony from several Stillwater Ridge residents who say you and Mr. Hale maintain separate bedrooms, that you're rarely seen together in town, that when you do appear together, there's little physical affection or marital warmth. We're private people, Rowan said. Or you're two people living under the same roof for mutual convenience while pretending to be married. We're not pretending. Then prove it. Walsh leaned forward. Tell me something intimate about your husband, Mrs. Hale. Something only a wife would know. Eliza's mind raced. What could she say that would satisfy them without being too personal? He has nightmares about the war. Twice a week, sometimes more. He wakes up around 3 in the morning and can't get back to sleep, so he goes outside and checks the fence lines, even though he just checked them the day before. It's not about the fences. It's about needing to move, to do something physical to burn off the anxiety. The room went quiet. Walsh's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. And you, Mr. Hale, Brennan said. Something about your wife. She counts things when she's nervous, cracks in the floor, knots in wood, fence posts on the trail. She doesn't realize she's doing it, but her lips move slightly as she counts. She's been counting since we sat down. Right now, she's at 73. Eliza's breath caught. She hadn't known he'd noticed that. She also hates coffee but drinks it anyway because she thinks I expect her to, Rowan continued. So she loads it with honey until it's barely coffee anymore. And she talks to the horses when she thinks I can't hear, telling them about her day. The gray mare is her favorite. She named her Sterling even though I'd already named her Smokey 3 years ago. Walsh and Brennan exchanged looks. Foster kept writing. That's very detailed, Brennan said, but details can be rehearsed. Agent Cutler, you have questions? Cutler stepped forward, his smile widening. I do, Magistrate. Thank you. He turned to face them. Mr. Hale, when you chose Mrs. Hale from the platform, what was your first thought? That she needed help. Not that she was attractive, that you were drawn to her? No. So you felt sorry for her, pity. Rowan's hands clenched. I felt recognition, like looking in a mirror. Interesting metaphor. Mrs. Hale, do you love your husband? The question hit like a slap. Eliza opened her mouth, then closed it. Did she love him? She relied on him, respected him, wanted him. But love? That word carried weight she wasn't sure she could claim. I care about him deeply, she said. That's not what I asked. It's the answer I'm giving. Cutler's smile sharpened. You can't say you love him because you don't. This is a marriage of convenience that you're both trying to legitimize after the fact. That's not true, Rowan said, but Cutler talked over him. I have 3 witnesses prepared to testify that this marriage is fraudulent. People who've seen you two together, who've observed your interactions. They'll tell this hearing that you behave like business partners, not spouses. That there's no warmth, no genuine affection. Who are these witnesses? Eliza demanded. That's privileged information until they testify. In other words, you've bribed people to lie. Careful, Mrs. Hale. Brennan's voice was sharp. Accusations like that require proof. So do accusations that our marriage is fake. Where's his proof? Testimony from people he's probably paying? We've told you the truth. We didn't start as a love match, but we're together now. Really together. That's what matters. What matters, Walsh said, is whether this marriage meets territorial standards for legitimacy. And right now, I'm not convinced it does. Rowan stood up. Then what would convince you? You want us to perform affection for your benefit? Recite poetry? We're not actors. We're people trying to build a life together the best way we know how. Sit down, Mr. Hale. No. You want proof our marriage is real? How about the fact that we've made it work for 7 months when most arranged marriages fall apart in weeks? How about my wife running my books and saving me thousands of dollars? How about her standing up to Cutler when he came to harass us? How about me teaching her to survive on a mountain ranch when she'd never been outside a city before? Those are real things, real work, real partnership. Mr. Hale, sit down now or I'll hold you in contempt. Rowan sat, but his eyes blazed with anger. Eliza reached over and took his hand. He squeezed back hard enough to hurt. I think we've heard enough, Brennan said. Agent Cutler, do you have anything else? Just one more question. Cutler looked directly at Eliza. Mrs. Hale, are you pregnant? The room went silent. Eliza stared at him, completely blindsided. What? Simple question. Are you pregnant? I don't see how that's relevant. It's very relevant. Pregnancy would be strong evidence of marital consummation, of a genuine physical relationship. So I'll ask again, are you pregnant? Eliza's mind reeled. She wasn't pregnant. At least she didn't think so. But admitting that would make it look like she and Rowan weren't having a real marriage. And lying would be worse if she was eventually proven wrong. No, she said finally. I'm not pregnant. Cutler's smile was triumphant. 7 months of marriage and no pregnancy. No children. For a frontier couple supposedly building a life together, that's unusual. Some couples can't have children, Rowan said coldly. Some don't want them yet. Some are none of your damn business. But this hearing is my business, and the absence of children combined with the circumstances of your marriage suggests this union is not what you claim. You're reaching, Eliza said, making assumptions based on nothing. Am I? Let's review the facts. You married to avoid consequences, not out of affection. You maintain separate bedrooms. You can't say you love each other. You have no children. Witnesses will testify you don't behave like married people. What part of this suggests legitimacy? Eliza felt the room closing in. Everything Cutler said was technically true, but missing context, missing the reality of what they'd built. But how did you explain that to people who only cared about checking boxes? We're done here, Brennan said. The panel will deliberate and deliver a verdict within the hour. You're dismissed. They stumbled out of the hearing room into the hallway. Eliza's legs felt weak. Rowan guided her to a bench and they sat in stunned silence. That was bad, he finally said. Yeah. The pregnancy question, that was calculated. He knew it would make us look bad either way. I should have lied. No, lying would have been worse when they found out. Rowan dropped his head into his hands. I shouldn't have lost my temper, shouldn't have stood up like that. Made us look unstable. You were defending us. I was making it worse. They sat there waiting as time crawled. Other couples came and went. Some got provisional acceptance. One got immediate annulment, the woman screaming as guards escorted her out. Each verdict felt like a preview of their own fate. Finally, after 90 minutes that felt like days, they were called back in. The panel sat exactly as before, their faces unreadable. Cutler stood to the side, barely containing his smugness. We've deliberated, Brennan said. This is a difficult case. The circumstances of your marriage are highly irregular, and there are legitimate questions about its authenticity. However, we also recognize that arranged marriages can develop into genuine partnerships over time. Therefore, our verdict is conditional approval pending verification. Eliza's heart leaped. Not annulment. They'd survived. You will remain married, Brennan continued, but subject to quarterly reviews for the next 2 years. During that time, you will provide proof of ongoing marital legitimacy. This includes shared living arrangements, evidence of financial interdependence, and eventually evidence of family planning. Additionally, you will report to Agent Cutler monthly for spot inspections. The relief died in Eliza's chest. Quarterly reviews, monthly inspections, 2 years of Cutler having license to invade their lives whenever he wanted. That's not standard procedure, Rowan said. It is now. For your case specifically, you're free to appeal, but I'll warn you that appeals rarely succeed and the alternative is immediate annulment. Your choice. It wasn't a choice. It was extortion dressed up as mercy. We accept, Eliza said before Rowan could object. Good. First quarterly review is in 3 months. First inspection is next month. Failure to comply will result in immediate annulment proceedings. Dismissed. They walked out of the territorial office into bright afternoon sunlight that felt like mockery. They'd won, technically. They were still married. But the victory was hollow, poisoned by the conditions attached to it. Cutler caught up to them before they reached their wagon. Congratulations on your conditional approval. I'll be seeing you monthly, as the magistrate ordered. Looking forward to our regular visits. Rowan turned on him fast enough to make Cutler step back. You rigged that hearing. Those witnesses you mentioned, you never called them because they don't exist. You just wanted to plant doubt. The panel made their decision based on evidence presented. Evidence you manufactured. This whole thing is a sham and you know it. Prove it. Cutler's smile was vicious. Or better yet, try to survive 2 years of scrutiny, because I'll be watching everything. Every transaction, every interaction, every moment of your lives. And the second you slip up, the second I catch you in a lie or an inconsistency, I'll bring you back before that panel and make sure the verdict is permanent. He walked away, leaving them standing in the street. Rowan's whole body was shaking with rage. I'm going to kill him. No, you're not. Eliza grabbed his arm. That's what he wants, for you to lose control and give him a reason to come after us. So what do? We survive, just like we've been doing. She pulled him toward the wagon. Come on, let's go home. The ride back was silent, both of them lost in their own thoughts. The mountains had never looked so far away. 2 years of monthly inspections, of Cutler invading their home, of constantly proving they deserved to exist. It felt like a prison sentence. When they finally reached the ranch, the sun was setting. The familiar sight of the buildings, the barn, the mountains rising behind them, it should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt fragile, like something that could be taken away at any moment. They unhitched the wagon in silence, fed the horses in silence, went into the house in silence. It wasn't until they were inside with the door closed that Eliza finally broke. She leaned against the table and felt the tears come, hot and angry, and full of frustration she'd been holding in all day. Rowan pulled her close and held her while she cried, his own face buried in her hair. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me. I chose to stay. But now you're stuck. 2 years of Cutler making our lives hell. We'll get through it. Eliza pulled back to look at him. We've gotten through everything else. This is different. This is constant surveillance, constant judgment. They want us to fail. Then we don't fail. She wiped her eyes. We give them exactly what they want to see. A perfect marriage, perfect cooperation, perfect everything. And when 2 years are up, they'll have no choice but to leave us alone. Rowan searched her face. You really think we can do that? I think we don't have a choice. She took his hands. You asked me in that hearing room if I loved you. I couldn't answer then because I was scared of what it meant. But I'll answer now. Yes, I love you. Not because I have to, not because it's convenient. Because you're the first person who ever saw me as something more than what I look like. Because you make me feel capable and strong and valued. Because when I think about the future, you're in it. That's love. Maybe it doesn't look like the storybook version, but it's real. Rowan's expression cracked. He pulled her close again, kissing her with a desperation that spoke of relief and fear and love all tangled together. I love you too, he said against her mouth. I didn't want to. Didn't think I could after the war, but you made me feel human again. Made this place feel like home instead of a hiding spot. I love you. They held each other as darkness fell outside. And somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled at the rising moon. The fight wasn't over. It might never be over, but they'd face it together. That was something. Maybe that was everything. The first inspection came 3 weeks later on a Tuesday morning when Eliza was elbow-deep in bread dough. She heard the horse before she saw it and knew immediately who it was. Cutler had a particular way of riding, aggressive, like he was punishing the animal for existing. Rowan, she called toward the barn. He appeared in the doorway, saw Cutler approaching, and his whole body went rigid. But he didn't move toward the house, didn't give Cutler the satisfaction of seeing him react. Cutler dismounted with exaggerated slowness, looking around like he was cataloging everything for a report, which he probably was. "Morning, Hales. Here for the monthly inspection." "It's been 3 weeks," Eliza said through the open door. "Not a month." "Close enough. May I come in?" It wasn't really a question. Eliza stepped back and let him enter, painfully aware of the flour on her hands, the mess on the counter, the unmade bed visible through the open bedroom door. Their bedroom. She and Rowan had moved into the same room the day after the hearing, partly because it made sense, and partly because they knew Cutler would check. "Nice setup you have here," Cutler said, walking slowly through the main room. "Very domestic." "Mrs. Hale, I see you're baking." "I am." "Good, good. Signs of a functioning household." He made notes in his ledger. "And where do you sleep, Mr. Hale?" "Same place I always sleep, my bed." "Which is where?" "You know where." Rowan's voice was ice. "You checked last time." "Humor me." Rowan pointed at their bedroom door. Cutler walked over and looked inside without asking permission. Eliza watched him take in the shared space, clothes hanging together, 2 pillows on one bed, the general disorder of 2 people actually living in the same room. "How often do you share this bed?" Cutler asked. "That's none of your business." "Actually, it's exactly my business. The panel approved your marriage conditionally based on evidence of genuine cohabitation. That includes marital relations." Eliza felt her face burn. "We're not discussing our private life with you." "Then I'll note in my report that you refuse to answer questions about marital intimacy. The panel will draw their own conclusions." "Note whatever you want," Rowan said. "We share a bed. We share a life. That's all you need to know." Cutler smiled and made more notes. He moved through the house like he owned it, opening cupboards, checking closets, examining their bookkeeping. He found nothing because there was nothing to find. They were exactly what they appeared to be, a married couple running a ranch. But that didn't stop him from taking an hour to conduct a 15-minute inspection. "Everything seems in order," he finally said. "For now. I'll be back next month, same time." "Can't wait," Eliza muttered. After he left, Rowan punched the wall hard enough to split his knuckles. Eliza cleaned the blood without comment and wrapped his hand while he stood there vibrating with suppressed rage. 2 years of this," he said. "We'll survive it." "I don't want to survive it. I want to fight back." "We are fighting back, by not giving him anything to use against us." But the inspections wore on them. Cutler came every month like clockwork, always finding new questions to ask, new areas to probe. He interviewed their neighbors about whether they seemed like a real couple. He checked their financial records for any sign of separate accounting. He asked invasive questions about their plans for children. The quarterly reviews were worse. Back to the territorial office, back to that room with Brennan and Walsh and Foster, answering the same questions over and over, proving and reproving what should have been accepted the first time. Through it all, Eliza and Rowan held together. The constant scrutiny could have driven them apart, but instead it forced them closer. They developed codes for when they were too angry to talk safely, signals for when one of them needed space, routines for dealing with Cutler's visits that minimized the damage he could do. And slowly, almost without noticing, they stopped performing their marriage and started living it. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch work intensified. They hired 2 seasonal hands to help with the cattle. Brothers from Montana who didn't ask questions and worked hard. Eliza managed the books and continued taking on clients from other ranches. Her reputation had grown to the point where people sought her out specifically, trusting her with their finances more than they trusted the banks in town. One evening in late June, she tallied up her earnings from the past 3 months and realized she'd made almost as much as Rowan had from the ranch. She showed him the numbers, expecting pride or approval. Instead, he looked troubled. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing. This is good." "It doesn't look like you think it's good." Rowan set down the ledger. "You don't need me anymore. Financially, I mean. You could leave, set up on your own, and you'd be fine." Eliza stared at him. "Is that what you think? That I'm staying because I need your money?" "I'm saying you have options now. You're not trapped." "I never was trapped. Not after the first month." She moved around the table to face him. I'm here because I want to be here. Because this is home. Because you're my husband and I love you. Money has nothing to do with it. But if something happened, nothing's going to happen. You don't know that. Rowan's voice was rough with emotion he was trying to hide. Cutler could still win. The panel could annul us at the next review. Or I could get hurt or sick or... Stop. Eliza grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. Stop planning for disaster. We're doing fine. Better than fine. We're building something real here. I know, I just don't want you to feel obligated. I don't feel obligated. I feel grateful. For this place, for this life, for you. She kissed him softly. Stop trying to give me reasons to leave. I'm not going anywhere. He pulled her close and held on like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. And maybe she was. Maybe they were that for each other, anchor points in a life that kept trying to tear them apart. July brought a crisis that had nothing to do with Cutler. One of the seasonal hands, the younger brother, barely 20, got kicked by a horse and broke 3 ribs. The older brother wanted to take him to town, but the kid was coughing blood, and every bump in the wagon made him scream. He won't make it to town, Rowan said grimly. Not like this. Then what do we do? Eliza looked at the kid, his name was Danny, and felt helpless. She knew numbers, accounts, how to manage a household. She didn't know how to fix a broken body. There's a doctor about 5 miles north, old cavalry surgeon named Whitmore, retired up here after the war. Rowan was already moving toward the barn. I'll bring him here. That'll take hours. You have a better idea? She didn't. Rowan rode out at a gallop while Eliza and the older brother, Marcus, tried to keep Danny comfortable and alive. She'd never felt more useless. The kid was in agony, every breath a struggle, and all she could do was hold his hand and tell him help was coming. Marcus paced like a caged animal. He's my baby brother. Ma made me promise to look after him. If he dies, he's not going to die, Eliza said, with more confidence than she felt. But Danny's breathing got worse, more labored, and pink foam appeared at the corners of his mouth. Internal bleeding, Eliza thought, though she didn't say it out loud. The kid was drowning from the inside. Rowan returned 2 hours later with an old man who moved like his bones hurt, but whose eyes were sharp and focused. Dr. Whitmore took one look at Danny and started barking orders. Hot water, clean cloth, whiskey. Now. Eliza moved fast, gathering supplies while Whitmore examined the kid. His hands were surprisingly gentle for someone so gruff. Broken ribs punctured his lung, Whitmore said. Needs to be drained or he'll suffocate. Somebody hold him down. What followed was the worst thing Eliza had ever witnessed. Whitmore made an incision between Danny's ribs and inserted a hollow reed, and blood and fluid poured out in a rush. Danny screamed until he passed out, and Marcus had to be physically restrained from interfering. But it worked. Slowly, Danny's breathing eased. The blue tinge left his lips. By the time Whitmore finished stitching him up, the kid was sleeping instead of dying. He'll live, Whitmore said, washing his hands. But he needs to stay still for at least 2 weeks. Any movement could start the bleeding again. He can stay here, Eliza said immediately. We'll take care of him. Marcus looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. We can't pay you. I'm not asking you to pay. You work for us. That makes you our responsibility. Most bosses wouldn't see it that way. We're not most bosses. They set Danny up in Eliza's old room, the one she'd used when she first arrived. Whitmore stayed the night to monitor him, and over dinner he and Rowan talked about the war. Turned out they'd served in different units but fought in some of the same battles. There was a recognition between them, an understanding that came from shared trauma. You're doing well for yourself, Whitmore said to Rowan. Good land, good wife, better than most of us managed after everything. Some days it doesn't feel that way. Some days it won't. That's the price of surviving when others didn't, but you keep going anyway. Whitmore glanced at Eliza. She know about the bad nights. She knows. And she stays anyway. That's something. Whitmore nodded approval. Hold on to that. After Whitmore left the next morning, Eliza threw herself into nursing Danny back to health. She changed his bandages, brought him food, sat with him when the pain got bad. Rowan and Marcus handled the ranch work, but Eliza barely noticed. She'd found something to focus on besides Cutler and inspections, and proving their marriage was real. Danny improved slowly. By the end of the first week, he could sit up without help. By the end of the second week, he was eating solid food and complaining about being bored. Marcus's relief was palpable. "I don't know how to thank you," he said to Eliza one evening. "You saved his life." "Dr. Whitmore saved his life. I just kept him comfortable." "You did more than that. You cared. That's rare out here." Marcus hesitated. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask." "Is it true what they say in town about you and Hale, that your marriage is fake?" Eliza's stomach tightened. "What exactly do they say?" "That you got married to avoid trouble. That the government's making you prove it's real. That Cutler's got it out for you both." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "I don't usually listen to gossip, but Danny and I were thinking about staying on after the season ends. We need to know if we're walking into a mess." "It's complicated," Eliza said carefully. "The marriage started as an arrangement, but it's not fake. Not anymore. And yes, we're under scrutiny because a territorial agent has a personal grudge. But we're handling it." You sure about that? Because from what I hear, Cutler doesn't let go of grudges." "I'm sure." She looked Marcus in the eye. "If you and Danny want to stay, you're welcome. We could use reliable help, but I won't lie to you. There might be difficulties. Cutler might hassle you just for working for us. You need to know that before you decide." Marcus thought about it. "We'll stay. Danny and I, we've dealt with worse than some petty bureaucrat, and you saved my brother's life. That means something." So they stayed, and having them there helped more than Eliza expected. The ranch ran smoother with 4 sets of hands instead of 2. Marcus was good with the cattle, and once Danny recovered, he turned out to be skilled with carpentry. He fixed the barn roof, rebuilt the supply shed, and started work on a chicken coop. "Never had chickens before," Rowan said, watching Danny frame it out. "Well, we're getting them," Eliza replied. "I'm tired of paying Henderson's prices for eggs." "You planning to take care of chickens on top of everything else?" "I'm planning to delegate. Danny can handle it." Rowan almost smiled. "You're getting bossy." "I've always been bossy. You're just noticing now." The chicken coop was finished by mid-August, and Eliza bought 6 hens and a rooster from a farm outside Stillwater Ridge. She was in town picking them up when she ran into Margaret Chen from the boarding house. "Eliza!" "Good to see you. Heard you saved a young man's life." News traveled fast. "Dr. Whitmore did the saving. I just helped." "That's not what I heard. Danny's been telling everyone who'll listen about how you nursed him back to health." Margaret lowered her voice. "It's changing opinions. People are starting to see you differently." "I don't need people to see me differently. I just need them to leave me alone." "That's not how communities work. But I'll say this. You're building a reputation as someone reliable, someone who helps neighbors. That matters out here." It shouldn't have mattered to Eliza what the town thought. But she'd be lying if she said it didn't feel good to be seen as something other than the woman nobody wanted. She was loading the chicken crate onto the wagon when Cutler appeared. "Mrs. Hale, didn't expect to see you in town today." "Just picking up supplies." "Supplies, right." He peered at the crate. "Starting a farm operation, are you?" "Just chickens?" "Just chickens," he repeated, making notes. "Expanding your operations, that's interesting." "It's not interesting. It's practical." "Still, I'll need to update my reports. The panel likes to know when households are making significant changes." 6 chickens isn't a significant change. "That's for me to determine." He smiled that awful smile. "See you at the next inspection. 3 weeks." He walked away and Eliza wanted to throw something at his head. Instead, she climbed onto the wagon and drove home, the chickens squawking indignantly the whole way. Rowan was waiting in the yard. He took one look at her face and knew. "Cutler? He's going to report our chickens as a significant operational change." "Of course he is." Rowan helped her unload the crate. "Because he's a petty tyrant with nothing better to do than make our lives difficult." "Only 20 more months," Eliza said tiredly. 20 more months. But that night, as they lay in bed, Rowan said quietly, "What if we just left? Sold the ranch? Moved somewhere Cutler can't touch us?" "And let him win?" "It wouldn't be winning. It would be choosing our peace over his punishment." Eliza rolled over to look at him. "You love this place. You built it with your own hands. You really want to walk away?" "I love you more than I love the ranch." If staying here means 2 years of constant harassment, maybe it's not worth it. It's worth it. She was sure of that even if nothing else was clear. This is our home. We don't let bullies chase us away from home. Rowan pulled her close. When did you get so stubborn? I've always been stubborn. You're just noticing now. He laughed, the sound surprising them both. They didn't laugh much these days. The weight of the scrutiny had pressed the humor out of their lives. But lying there in the dark, holding each other, they found a moment of lightness. It didn't last. The next quarterly review in September was brutal. Brennan had clearly been receiving detailed reports from Cutler because he asked questions that showed intimate knowledge of their daily lives. How often did they attend community events? Why hadn't they joined the church? When were they planning to start a family? That last question hit Eliza like a physical blow. She'd been trying not to think about it, but the truth was she should have gotten pregnant by now if it was going to happen naturally. 8 months of sharing a bed, and nothing. Either she couldn't conceive or Rowan couldn't father children, and either way it was fuel for Cutler's argument that their marriage wasn't real. We'll have children when we're ready, she said carefully. You've been married almost a year, Walsh pointed out. Most frontier couples have a child by now, or at least one on the way. We're not most couples. No, you're not. You're a couple under conditional approval who needs to demonstrate genuine marital intent. Children would go a long way toward proving that. So we should have a baby just to satisfy your requirements? Rowan's voice was sharp. That's what you're suggesting? I'm suggesting that the absence of children, combined with other factors, raises questions about the nature of your relationship. The nature of our relationship is our business, not when it's under territorial review. They went in circles like that for over an hour. By the end, Eliza felt wrung out and hollow. The panel gave them continued conditional approval, but noted in the record that the lack of children was concerning and would be monitored closely at future reviews. On the ride home, neither of them spoke. The unspoken hung between them. What if they couldn't have children? What if that became the excuse the panel used to annul them? We could adopt, Rowan said suddenly. What? If we can't have children naturally, we could adopt. There are orphans in the territory, kids who need homes. You'd do that? Take in someone else's child just to prove our marriage is real? I do it because a child deserves a home. And because maybe it's not a bad idea anyway. This place is big enough for more than just us. Eliza felt something warm spread through her chest. You've thought about this. I've thought about a lot of things. What our life could look like. What we could build here. He glanced at her. I know we didn't plan this, any of this. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the best things aren't planned. You want children? I want a life with you. If that includes children, good. If it doesn't, that's okay too. But I'm not going to let Cutler's timeline dictate our choices. They didn't make any decisions that night, but the conversation opened something between them, a future that had always been theoretical suddenly becoming possible. October came with this first snow, light dustings that melted by noon but promised heavier storms to come. They prepared for winter, stocking supplies, reinforcing structures, moving cattle to sheltered pastures. Marcus and Danny had proven themselves invaluable, and Rowan officially hired them on permanently. They'd build a bunkhouse come spring, but for now, the brothers slept in the barn loft and took meals at the main house. It was good having people around. The ranch felt less isolated, more like a real operation. And when Cutler came for his monthly inspection, the presence of hired hands seemed to unnerve him. He couldn't harass Rowan and Eliza as freely with witnesses around, but he found other ways to make his presence felt. He started arriving at odd hours, dawn, dusk, once at midnight, claiming he'd seen lights and wanted to make sure everything was all right. He questioned Marcus and Danny about what they observed, trying to get them to say something incriminating. He examined every financial record looking for irregularities. He found nothing because there was nothing to find. But the constant vigilance took its toll. I'm so tired, Eliza said one night in early November. They just endured another surprise inspection, and she felt like she'd been beaten. Tired of being watched, tired of proving we're real, tired of everything. I know. Do you ever think about just giving up, letting them annul us and being done with it? Every day, Rowan's voice was raw. And every day I decide I'm not giving Cutler the satisfaction. That's spite, not love. Maybe spite is what's keeping us going right now. Maybe that's okay. Eliza didn't have an answer for that. Maybe he was right. Maybe spite was a valid foundation for survival. But that night, something shifted. She woke around 2 in the morning feeling strange. Not sick exactly, but off. She lay there trying to identify the sensation and then suddenly knew. She was late. Over 2 weeks late. Her heart started hammering. It could be nothing. Stress could delay things. But it could also be something. Something that would change everything. She didn't tell Rowan. Not yet. She'd wait, make sure, not get his hopes up for nothing. But the possibility sat in her chest like a lit candle, warm and terrifying. A week later, she was sure. Morning sickness hit hard and specific, and her body felt different in ways she recognized from watching other women. She was pregnant. She told Rowan on a cold November morning while he was getting ready to check the cattle. He just pulled on his coat when she said, "I'm pregnant." He froze. "What?" "I'm pregnant. About 6 weeks, I think." He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Then slowly, his expression transformed, shock giving way to something that looked like joy and fear mixed together. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor confirming it." Rowan crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. He didn't say anything, just held her so tight she could feel his heart racing against hers. "This is good," she said, needing to hear it out loud. "This is what we wanted." "This is terrifying," he corrected, "but yeah, it's good." They told Marcus and Danny at dinner, and the brothers congratulated them with genuine warmth. They didn't tell anyone else. Not yet. But Eliza knew the secret wouldn't keep long. Small changes were already happening, the way she tired more easily, the morning nausea, the subtle rounding of her belly that would become obvious soon enough. Cutler's next inspection was the first week of December. He noticed immediately. "Mrs. Hale, you look different." "Do I?" His eyes narrowed. "Are you expecting?" There was no point lying. He'd find out eventually. "Yes." The smile that spread across his face was complicated. Satisfaction mixed with something else. Disappointment, maybe, that he was losing his best weapon against them. "Congratulations. I'll note it in my report." "I'm sure you will." After he left, Rowan said, "That was almost civil." "Because he knows this changes things. The panel can't argue our marriage isn't real if we're having a baby." "They could still try." "Let them." Eliza felt a fierce protectiveness rise up in her. "We've done everything they asked, given them everything they demanded. This baby proves what they've been questioning for a year. We're real, we're legitimate, and there's nothing Cutler can do about it." But she was wrong about that. There was always something men like Cutler could do. The December quarterly review should have been a victory lap. They'd provided proof of genuine marital relations, evidence of family planning, everything the panel had asked for. Eliza was visibly pregnant now, 3 months along and showing. But instead of approval, they got more questions. Was the pregnancy planned or accidental? Had they consulted with a doctor? Were they prepared financially for a child? Did they have adequate support systems? "What more do you want from us?" Rowan finally demanded. "We followed every rule, met every requirement. My wife is carrying our child. What else do we need to prove?" "We're just being thorough," Brennan said, "ensuring the child will be born into a stable household." "The household is stable. We have steady income, hired help, a strong support network. We're more prepared than most couples out here." "Perhaps." Walsh consulted her notes. "But there are still concerns about the origins of your marriage. The fact that it began as a transactional arrangement raises questions about whether this child is truly wanted or simply another requirement being fulfilled." Eliza felt rage burn through her. "How dare you suggest this baby isn't wanted? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking legitimate questions." "No, you're looking for excuses to invalidate us, and you're not going to find them." Eliza stood up, her hands protectively over her stomach. "This child is wanted. This marriage is real. And if you can't accept that after everything we've shown you, then you're not interested in truth. You're interested in control." "Mrs. Hale, we're done. Give us your verdict or let us leave, but we're done answering the same questions over and over." But Brennan and Walsh exchanged looks. Finally, Brennan said, "Continued conditional approval. Next review in 3 months." 3 months would be March. Eliza would be 6 months pregnant by then, obviously showing unable to hide anything. Maybe that would finally be enough. They left the territorial office and found Cutler waiting outside. "Congratulations on your continued approval," he said, but there was no warmth in it. "Must be a relief." "It's exhausting," Eliza said bluntly. "This whole process is exhausting. Well, only 15 more months to go, then you'll be free. If you haven't found some other excuse to extend it by then." Cutler's smile sharpened. "I follow the law, Mrs. Hale, that's all. The law you're inventing as you go." "Careful, that sounds like an accusation." "It's an observation." She was too tired to be diplomatic anymore. "You want us to fail. You've wanted it from the beginning, but we're not going to fail. We're going to survive your scrutiny, raise our child, and build the life you've been trying to destroy. And there's nothing you can do about it." For just a moment, something dangerous flickered in Cutler's eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual smug superiority. "We'll see," he said, and walked away. Winter closed in hard after that. Heavy snows trapped them on the ranch for days at a time. But inside the house, something was changing. Eliza's pregnancy became the center around which everything else revolved. Rowan built a cradle from pine. Marcus and Danny started construction on a small addition to the house, a nursery. Margaret Chen sent care packages from town with baby clothes and advice. And slowly, the constant scrutiny began to feel less overwhelming. Not gone. Cutler still came monthly, the reviews still loomed, but manageable. They were building something real that would outlast the harassment. On Christmas Eve, Eliza felt the baby move for the first time. She grabbed Rowan's hand and pressed it to her belly, and they felt it together, that flutter of life that made everything real in a new way. "Hello in there," Rowan said softly to her stomach. "We're your parents, and we're going to do our best by you." Eliza felt tears slide down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming rightness of this moment. A year ago, she'd been alone on a platform, convinced she'd never have a real life. Now she was here, married, pregnant, home, and it felt like a miracle. Not a smooth miracle, not a perfect one, but real and hard one and hers. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, and for the first time in months, she believed it. January brought storms that buried the ranch under 4 feet of snow and temperatures cold enough to freeze breath in the air. Eliza was 4 months pregnant now, her belly unmistakable under her layers of clothing. Moving had become harder, and Rowan watched her like she might break. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she said one morning when he tried to stop her from carrying firewood. "You're pregnant and stubborn." "Same thing I've always been, just rounder now." He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. The pregnancy had changed him in ways Eliza was still discovering. He touched her more. Casual brushes of his hand against her back, fingers lingering on her arm. And at night, he talked to her belly like the baby could already hear him, telling stories about the ranch and the mountains and what their life would be like. It should have felt absurd. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The March quarterly review arrived with the thaw. Eliza was 6 months pregnant, exhausted from poor sleep and the constant weight of carrying another human. But she dressed carefully, fixed her hair, and prepared for another round of interrogation. The panel looked different this time. Brennan seemed less hostile. Walsh almost sympathetic. Even Foster, who usually just took notes, met Eliza's eyes with something like respect. "Mrs. Hale," Brennan began, "you're obviously expecting. Obviously. Due date? Late May, according to Dr. Whitmore. And you've been receiving proper medical care. As proper as possible this far from town. Dr. Whitmore checks on me monthly." Brennan made notes, but his questions were perfunctory now. The pregnancy had changed the dynamic. They couldn't argue the marriage wasn't real when the physical evidence was right in front of them. The review lasted barely 30 minutes. A record. Continued conditional approval, next review in June. By then, Eliza would have given birth. The baby would exist as undeniable proof. Cutler was waiting outside again, but his usual smugness was missing. "Congratulations on another successful review." "Thank you," Eliza said carefully, suspicious of his tone. "Must be a relief, knowing you're almost through the worst of it." "We've been through the worst of it since the beginning. You made sure of that." "I was doing my job. You were harassing us because Rowan wouldn't let you push him around." Eliza was too tired to pretend otherwise. But it's almost over now, and then you'll have to find someone else to torment. Cutler's jaw tightened. You think this is over? You think having a baby makes you safe? I think the panel can't justify continuing conditional approval once we've met every requirement they've set. Maybe. Or maybe they'll find new requirements, new standards you need to meet. Then we'll meet those too. Eliza moved past him toward the wagon where Rowan was waiting. We're not going anywhere, Cutler. Get used to it. She climbed onto the wagon with effort, and Rowan drove them away without a word. But once they were out of sight of town, he pulled the horses to a stop. You all right? He asked. Tired, angry, tired of being angry. He's going to try something, you know that. I know, but what can he do? We followed every rule, met every condition. The baby proves everything they questioned. Men like Cutler don't need logic. They just need spite. Rowan stared at the trail ahead. We need to be careful. We've been careful for a year and a half. I'm done being careful. I'm done letting him dictate our lives. Eliza says, no, listen to me. She turned to face him fully. We've spent so long trying to prove we're legitimate that we've forgotten we are legitimate. This marriage is real. This baby is real. Our life is real. And I'm done acting like we need anyone's permission for it to exist. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up the reins and started the horses moving again. Okay. You're right. We're done being defensive. We're done proving ourselves. We just live our lives and let them deal with it. It sounded good in theory. But Eliza knew it wouldn't be that simple. Cutler had invested too much in destroying them to give up now. She was right. 3 weeks later, Cutler arrived for his monthly inspection with 2 other territorial agents. Eliza recognized one of them from the hearings, a hard-faced man named Morrison who'd sat in on one of the reviews. Mrs. Hale, Cutler said with false pleasantness, this is Agent Morrison and Agent Reed. They're here to conduct a joint inspection. Why? Rowan appeared from the barn, his expression dark. One agent wasn't enough? New protocol. All conditionally approved marriages in their final year require enhanced verification. Cutler smiled. Just being thorough. 3 agents spread through the house like locusts, examining everything with renewed scrutiny. They checked the nursery, finished now, with the cradle Rowan had built and blankets Margaret had sent. They examined financial records, inspected sleeping arrangements, even looked through personal belongings. Morrison spent a long time studying the documents on Eliza's desk. Contracts with other ranchers, ledgers, correspondence. You do bookkeeping for others? I do. That's unusual. Most ranch wives don't have outside employment. I'm not most ranch wives. Clearly. He made notes. How much do you earn from this work? Enough? Why does it matter? Financial independence can suggest a marriage of convenience rather than genuine partnership. Eliza stared at him. You're saying me being good at my job is evidence our marriage is fake? I'm saying it raises questions. Then ask better questions. She stood up, her back aching from sitting too long. I work because I'm good at it, and people need help. My husband supports it because he's not threatened by his wife being competent. That's what a real partnership looks like. Morrison's expression didn't change. We'll note your response. The inspection lasted 3 hours. By the end, Eliza was so exhausted she could barely stand. Rowan had to help her to a chair while the agents conferred in low voices. Finally, Cutler approached. Everything seems in order. For now. For now, Rowan repeated. Meaning what? Meaning we'll be back for another joint inspection next month. New protocol requires monthly joint verifications for the final 6 months of conditional approval. That's not real protocol. You're making it up. Take it up with the territorial governor if you disagree. Cutler headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Mrs. Hale? You should know, we've received complaints about your business practices. Some ranchers claim you've been overcharging for services. That's a lie. Maybe, but we have to investigate all complaints. I'll be looking into your client relationships very carefully. He smiled. Just doing my job. After they left, Eliza sat in stunned silence. Rowan paced like a caged animal, his hands flexing like he wanted to hit something. He's trying to destroy your business, he said. Spreading rumors, scaring off clients. Let him try. My clients know what I'm worth. But over the following week, 3 clients canceled their contracts. No explanation, just terse notes saying they were going in a different direction. Henderson pulled Eliza aside when she went to town for supplies. Cutler's been talking to people, saying you're charging unfair rates, that you're taking advantage. It's nonsense, but people are nervous. They don't want trouble with the territorial office. So they abandoned me instead. They're scared. Can't blame them for that. Henderson looked apologetic. For what it's worth, I think you're the best accountant in 3 territories, and I'll keep working with you no matter what Cutler says. Thank you. But the damage was done. By April, Eliza had lost half her clients. The income she'd built so carefully was evaporating, and with it, her sense of independence. She tried not to let it show, but Rowan knew. We'll be fine without that money, he said. That's not the point. I built something real, and he's destroying it out of spite. Then we fight back. How? He has the power. We're just trying to survive. Rowan pulled her close, careful of her belly. We've survived everything else. We'll survive this too. But Eliza wasn't sure anymore. She was 7 months pregnant, exhausted, watching everything she'd built crumble while Cutler circled like a vulture. And the baby was coming soon, bringing new vulnerabilities, new ways for Cutler to hurt them. The next joint inspection was worse. Morrison brought questions about their hiring practices. Were Marcus and Danny being paid fairly? Did they have proper contracts? Were working conditions safe? Every aspect of the ranch was scrutinized, and criticisms were noted with ominous thoroughness. You're building a case, Rowan said flatly, looking for violations to use against us. We're ensuring compliance with territorial labor standards, Reed replied. Nothing personal. Everything about this is personal. After the agents left, Marcus approached Rowan with a worried expression. They were asking me questions. About you two, about the marriage, about whether things seemed genuine. What did you tell them? The truth, that you're the best employers I've ever had, that your marriage is as real as any I've seen, that you're good people. Marcus hesitated, but I don't think they wanted to hear that. They kept pushing, trying to get me to say something different. They're building a narrative, Eliza said tiredly. Facts don't matter if they've already decided what story to tell. May arrived with unseasonable heat, and Eliza feeling like she might split apart from the weight of carrying another human. Dr. Whitmore visited weekly now, checking on the baby's position, making sure everything was progressing normally. He seemed satisfied, but warned Eliza to rest more. Can't rest with monthly inspections and a ranch to run. Then delegate. Your husband and his men can handle the ranch. You handle growing that baby. But Eliza couldn't let go. Couldn't trust that things would hold together without her constant attention. The inspections had made her paranoid, always watching for the next attack. It came on a warm evening in mid-May. Eliza was sitting on the porch, grateful for the cool air, when she heard riders approaching. Multiple riders, moving fast. Rowan came out of the barn, saw them, and his whole body tensed. Get inside. What's wrong? Just get inside, now. Eliza moved as fast as her pregnant body allowed. Through the window, she watched 6 riders pull into the yard. Cutler was there, along with Morrison, Reed, and 3 men wearing territorial marshal badges. Rowan Hale, one of the marshals called. We have a warrant for your arrest. Eliza's blood turned to ice. She threw open the door and stumbled onto the porch. Arrest for what? Violation of territorial labor laws, failure to maintain proper employment documentation, operating without required business licenses. The marshal read from a paper. Multiple violations documented over the past 3 months. That's insane, Rowan said. We have all the proper paperwork. Not according to Agent Morrison's investigation. You'll need to come with us. Don't do this, Eliza said desperately. We've followed every rule. Stand aside, ma'am. The marshal moved toward Rowan. Marcus and Danny appeared from the barn, looking ready to fight. Rowan shook his head at them sharply. Don't. It'll only make it worse. How can it be worse? Marcus demanded. They're arresting you for nonsense. And if you interfere, they'll arrest you too. Rowan looked at Eliza. Get Henderson. Get anyone who'll listen. Tell them what's happening. I'm not leaving you, Sit. You have to. He moved close enough to touch her face. For the baby. You have to fight this smart, not hard. Understand? Eliza felt tears burning her eyes. This is Cutler. He orchestrated this. I know, But he overplayed his hand. People will see through it. Rowan kissed her forehead. I'll be fine. Just take care of yourself and our child. They put him in chains, actually shackled him like he was dangerous, and led him away while Cutler watched with undisguised satisfaction. This is what happens when people don't respect territorial authority, Cutler said to Eliza. Your husband will have a fair trial, of course. Should only take a few months to sort out. A few months, right before our conditional approval expires. What a coincidence. Cutler's smile was vicious. Of course, without your husband present, your marriage status becomes questionable. The panel may decide to review your situation more carefully. You planned this. All of it. I enforced the law, that's all. He mounted his horse. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Hale. You'll be on your own for a while. They rode away, taking Rowan with them. Eliza stood in the yard, watching them disappear, feeling more alone than she'd felt since that first day on the platform. But she wasn't alone. Marcus and Danny flanked her, and when she looked at them, their expressions were grim but determined. We'll hold the ranch, Marcus said. You get him back. Eliza rode to town the next morning despite Whitmore's warnings about stress and exertion. She was 8 months pregnant and furious, and nothing was going to stop her from fighting back. Henderson's face fell when he saw her. I heard. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Help me. Who can I talk to? Who has influence? The territorial governor, but he's in the capital 3 days' ride from here. And even if you reached him, he'd listen to Cutler over me, I know. Eliza leaned heavily on the counter. There has to be something, some way to fight this. There is. Margaret Chen appeared from the back room. Public opinion. Cutler has legal authority, but he doesn't control what people think. What good does that do? More than you'd think. Cutler's position is political. He answers to the governor, but the governor answers to voters and influential citizens. If enough people make noise about this arrest being unjust, it won't change anything overnight, Eliza interrupted. And we don't have time. The final review is in 6 weeks. Then we work fast. Margaret's expression was fierce. How many people have you and Rowan helped over the past year? The family you saved, the hands you hired, every rancher whose books you've managed? They owe you. Time to collect. Over the next 3 days, Margaret and Henderson organized what could only be called a campaign. They spread the word about Rowan's arrest, about the bogus charges, about Cutler's vendetta. They gathered testimonials from everyone who'd benefited from the Hales' help. Sarah and Tom came from Miller's Creek, bringing their children and righteous anger. They saved Danny's life. We won't stand by while they're destroyed. Danny himself, now fully recovered, stood in the town square and told his story to anyone who'd listen. The Hales didn't have to help us. Most people wouldn't, but they did, and they didn't ask for anything in return. That's who they are. Other ranchers Eliza had worked for came forward with their own stories. She'd saved some from bankruptcy, helped others negotiate better contracts, taught more than a few basic business sense. One by one, they spoke up. Within a week, the groundswell was undeniable. People were talking, questioning, demanding answers about why a respected rancher was sitting in jail over paperwork violations that everyone knew were trivial. But Cutler held firm. Rowan remained in custody, and the trial date was set for late June, after the final review. He's going to win, Eliza said to Margaret one evening. She was so pregnant now she could barely move, and despair had settled over her like a shroud. Rowan will be convicted, or at least tied up in legal proceedings, and I'll be alone at the final review. The panel will annul us, and everything we've built will be destroyed. Not if we change the game, Margaret said. You've been playing by Cutler's rules this whole time, playing defense. Time to go on offense. How? By making this bigger than just you and Rowan. By making this about how the territorial system treats its citizens, about abuse of power and political persecution. Margaret leaned forward. I know a journalist, works for a paper in the capital. He's been looking for stories about territorial corruption. I think he'd be very interested in yours. The journalist arrived 5 days later, a thin man named Fletcher with sharp eyes and a notebook he filled rapidly as Eliza told her story. Everything from the platform to the hearings to the arrest. She held nothing back, too tired and angry to care about protecting herself. Fletcher asked hard questions and took meticulous notes. When she finished, he sat back with a low whistle. This is worse than I expected. Agent Cutler has quite a file, you know. This isn't his first territorial posting. He was removed from his last position for similar abuses. Then why is he here? Political connections. He knows how to play the game, how to stay just within legal bounds while destroying people. Fletcher tapped his notebook. But this story, a pregnant woman, a war veteran, systematic harassment over an arranged marriage, this could be the thing that finally ends his career. How long until you can publish? 2 weeks if I push it. The paper runs weekly. The final review is in 3 weeks. Then I'll make it work. Fletcher stood. You've been brave, Mrs. Hale. Braver than most would be in your situation. Let's make sure that bravery means something. He left to write his story, and Eliza waited. The baby was due any day now. Rowan was still in jail, and everything hung by a thread. The baby came first. 10 days before the final review on a sticky June evening, Eliza's water broke while she was going over accounts. She called for Marcus, who panicked appropriately, and ran for Dr. Whitmore while Danny stayed with her looking terrified. It's okay, Eliza said through the first contraction. This is normal. You're having a baby without your husband. That's not normal. Nothing about our life is normal. Whitmore arrived within an hour and took charge immediately. The labor was long, nearly 20 hours, and brutal. Eliza had never felt pain like that, never felt so completely at the mercy of her own body. She screamed and swore and demanded to know why women did this voluntarily. Because you forget the pain when you see the baby, Margaret said. She'd arrived sometime during the night and held Eliza's hand through the worst of it. That's nature's trick. Nature can go to hell. But then the baby was born. A girl, small and red and screaming with outrage at being forced into the world. Whitmore placed her on Eliza's chest, and everything else stopped mattering. Hello, Eliza whispered to her daughter. Hello, little one. The baby had Rowan's dark hair and what might become his gray eyes. She had Eliza's nose and her grandmother's chin. Eliza's mother, dead 10 years now but suddenly present in this new life. She was perfect and terrifying and real. What will you name her? Margaret asked. Eliza hadn't thought about names. She and Rowan had discussed it once, vaguely, but nothing had been decided. Now looking at her daughter, one name felt right. Rose, for the wild roses that grow by the creek. It's beautiful. Rowan will love it. But Rowan wasn't there. He was sitting in a jail cell, missing his daughter's birth because of Cutler's vendetta. The injustice of it made Eliza want to burn something down. We need to get him out, she said, before the review. You just gave birth, Whitmore said firmly. You need to rest, not travel. I need my husband. But Whitmore was right. She was too weak to travel, and Rose needed her. All Eliza could do was wait and hope that Fletcher's story would change things. The article ran 5 days later in the territorial capital's largest newspaper. Henderson brought her a copy, and Eliza read it with Rose sleeping on her chest. Fletcher had done his job. The article laid out everything: the platform system, the conditional approval process, Cutler's harassment, the bogus arrest. He'd interviewed witnesses, reviewed documents, built an airtight case for systematic abuse of power. The headline read, Territorial Agents' Vendetta: How One Couple's Marriage Became a Political Persecution. It's damning, Henderson said. People are already talking about it in town. Some are angry, some are defensive, but everyone's talking. Will it be enough? I don't know, but it's something. The response came faster than anyone expected. 2 days after publication, a special investigator arrived from the Capitol, a senior territorial official with authority over agents like Cutler. He went directly to the jail and interviewed Rowan. Then he reviewed the charges, examined the evidence, and released Rowan that same day. Marcus rode to the ranch at full gallop to deliver the news. He's free! They're letting him go! Eliza's knees went weak with relief. When? Now. He'll be home by tonight. Rowan arrived at sunset looking thinner and exhausted but whole. He climbed down from the wagon and just stood there, staring at the house like he couldn't believe it was real. Eliza walked out to meet him, moving slowly with Rose bundled in her arms. You have a daughter. Rowan's face transformed. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and looked down at the baby with an expression of such pure wonder that Eliza felt tears spill over. She's beautiful, he whispered. She's yours. Ours. He touched Rose's tiny hand with one finger, and the baby gripped it immediately. Rowan made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I'm sorry I wasn't there. You're here now. That's what matters. They stood together in the fading light, a family finally complete. But the fight wasn't over. The final review was in 4 days. The hearing room felt different this time. Word of Fletcher's article had spread, and there were people in the gallery, something that had never happened before. Margaret, Henderson, Sarah and Tom, Danny, Marcus, half a dozen ranchers Eliza had worked with. They'd come to bear witness. And Cutler wasn't there. Brennan noted his absence without explanation, but everyone knew why. The special investigator had suspended him pending a full inquiry into his conduct. Mr. and Mrs. Hale, Brennan began, this is your final review under conditional approval. You've been married for 19 months and have recently welcomed a child. A daughter, Rose. Rowan's voice was steady. Born June 8th. Congratulations. May I see her? Eliza unwrapped the blanket slightly, showing Rose's sleeping face. Walsh smiled, actually smiled, and even Foster looked moved. She's lovely, Walsh said. How are you managing as new parents? We're exhausted and terrified and happier than we've ever been, Eliza said honestly. Exactly like every new parent. Brennan made notes, but his heart didn't seem in it. After months of hostile questioning, the panel seemed almost gentle now. I've reviewed your file thoroughly, Brennan said. Your marriage began under unusual circumstances, but you've demonstrated sustained commitment, genuine partnership, and now you've brought a child into the world together. By any reasonable measure, this is a legitimate marriage. Eliza felt Rowan's hand find hers under the table. However, Brennan continued, and her heart sank, there's the matter of Agent Cutler's conduct during your review period. The special investigator's preliminary findings suggest systematic harassment and possible abuse of authority. That complicates things. How? Rowan's voice was tight. Because it raises questions about the validity of the entire conditional approval process. If the oversight was compromised, we need to determine whether your marriage can be considered properly verified. So after everything, you're still questioning us? Eliza couldn't keep the bitterness out of her voice. No, I'm saying the process was flawed, and you deserve better. Brennan closed the file. Mrs. Hale, Mr. Hale, on behalf of the territorial government, I apologize. You should never have been subjected to the scrutiny you endured. Your marriage is hereby granted full unconditional approval, effective immediately. The room went silent, then erupted. People in the gallery started applauding, and Henderson let out a whoop that made Rose startle awake. It's over, Eliza said, not quite believing it. It's over. You're fully recognized as a legitimate married couple with all attendant rights and privileges. No more reviews, no more inspections, no more conditional status. Brennan actually looked pleased. Go home and raise your daughter. That's all the territory asks of you now. They walked out of the hearing room into bright June sunshine, and Eliza felt like she could breathe for the first time in 19 months. Rowan pulled her close, careful of Rose between them, and just held her. We did it, he said. We actually did it. We survived. No, we won. Margaret organized an impromptu celebration at the boarding house. People brought food and drink, and strangers congratulated them like old friends. The town that had mocked Eliza on that platform now embraced her as one of their own. Late in the evening, when Rose was sleeping and Eliza's feet ached from standing, Henderson pulled her aside. You changed things here. You know that? What do you mean? That article, the investigation, it's making people look at the whole Settlement Act differently. The platform system, the conditional approvals, the way women are treated like property. There's talk of reforms, because of you. I just wanted to keep my family together. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes one person standing up makes everyone else braver. Henderson smiled. You're not the woman nobody wanted anymore. You're the woman who fought the system and won. Eliza didn't know what to say to that. She'd never set out to be a symbol or a revolutionary. She'd just tried to survive. But maybe that was enough. Maybe survival was its own form of victory. They stayed in town that night, too tired to make the trip home. The next morning, they loaded Rose into the wagon and started the familiar journey back to the ranch. The mountains looked different somehow, less isolating, more protective. Home. Marcus and Danny had maintained everything beautifully in their absence. The cattle were fat and healthy, the buildings in good repair. The books organized exactly as Eliza had left them. It was still her ranch, still her home, but now without the shadow of Cutler's surveillance hanging over it. Over the following weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. Rose demanded constant attention, and Eliza discovered that caring for a baby was harder than any ranch work she'd done. But Rowan was there, helping with middle-of-the-night feedings and diaper changes, learning alongside her how to keep a tiny human alive. They were terrible at it at first. Rose cried for hours, and they had no idea why. She refused to sleep unless held. She spit up everything Eliza tried to feed her. But slowly, they figured it out. Slowly, they became parents. Word came in July that Cutler had been dismissed from territorial service. The investigation had found multiple violations of conduct, abuse of authority, and evidence of personal vendettas against settlers. He was barred from holding any territorial position ever again. "Good," Rowan said when Henderson brought the news. "He can't hurt anyone else now." "Do you know what happened to him?" Eliza asked. "Went east, I heard. Back to whatever city spawned him." Henderson shrugged. "Some men can't handle the frontier. They need hierarchy and control. Out here, those things don't matter as much." August brought Eliza's clients back, apologetic and hopeful. She took them on selectively, only working with ranchers she actually liked. She had a daughter now, and priorities had shifted. The business was still important, but it wasn't everything. One evening in September, nearly a year since Rose's birth, Eliza stood on the porch watching the sunset while Rose toddled around the yard. She was walking now, unstable but determined, chasing chickens and squealing with delight. Rowan came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "That day on the platform? How certain I was that my life was over. And now? Now I know it was just beginning." She leaned back against him. "I never imagined this. A husband who loves me, a daughter, a home. It seemed impossible." "Nothing's impossible, just improbable. Very improbable." She turned to face him. "Do you ever regret it, choosing me?" "Every day." She punched his arm and he laughed. "I regret that it took me so long to realize what I had," he said seriously. "I regret all the time we wasted being defensive instead of just living. But choosing you? Best decision I ever made, even if I made it for the wrong reasons. The reasons don't matter anymore, only the results. And the results are pretty good." He watched Rose discover a beetle and try to pick it up. "We should probably stop her from eating that." "Probably." But they stood there a moment longer, watching their daughter explore the world with fearless curiosity. She'd never know what they'd gone through to give her this life. She'd grow up knowing she was wanted, loved, home. That was worth everything they'd endured. 2 years after that first hearing, Eliza stood in Stillwater Ridge's general store, her pregnant belly obvious under her coat. Rose held her hand, chattering about the candy Henderson kept behind the counter. A woman entered, young, maybe 20, with the hollow look Eliza recognized from a mirror 2 years ago. The look of someone who'd been chosen last or not at all. Henderson greeted her kindly. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for work. I can clean, sew, cook, anything really." "You come in on this morning wagon?" "Yes, from the platform." The woman's voice was flat. "I wasn't chosen. They're sending me to a labor assignment tomorrow unless I find employment." Eliza felt the old anger rise up, hot and familiar. The platform was still operating, still treating women like inventory. The reforms people had talked about hadn't materialized. "I have work," Eliza said. "If you're interested." The woman turned, hope flickering in her eyes. "Really? My husband and I run a ranch 3 hours from here. We need help with the house and books, room, board, fair wages. It's hard work, but it's honest." "I'll take it. Anything's better than the alternative." "What's your name?" "Anne. Anne Fletcher." Eliza smiled. "Well, Anne, welcome to the frontier. It's hard out here, but it's fair. You'll have a chance to build something real." They left town with Anne sitting in the back of the wagon, looking terrified and hopeful in equal measure. Rose entertained her with nonsense stories, and gradually Anne's rigid posture relaxed. "Thank you for this," she said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done." "You would have survived," Eliza said. "One way or another, but this way's better." When they reached the ranch, Rowan came out to meet them. He took in Anne's presence without comment, just nodded welcome. "Another one?" he asked Eliza later. "Another one. She needed help. We're going to end up running a refuge at this rate." "Would that be so bad?" Rowan looked at her, really looked, the way he had that first night by the fire when they'd recognized each other as fellow outsiders. No, it wouldn't be bad at all. They'd started as two broken people trying to survive a system designed to control them. They'd become something neither could have predicted, a partnership, a family, a home that welcomed others who'd been cast aside. The ranch grew over the years. Anne stayed and brought her sister when she arrived the next spring. They hired more hands, expanded the operation, bought adjacent land. Rose grew into a fierce, curious child who knew she was loved and safe. Eliza's business thrived, and Rowan's cattle became known as the best in 3 territories. But more than that, they built something that mattered, a place where people who'd been told they were worthless could discover their value, where marriages could be real even if they started fake, where survival wasn't the goal, living was. 10 years after that day on the platform, Eliza stood in the same spot on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. She was older now, with silver threading through her hair and lines around her eyes, but she was happy in a way she'd never imagined possible. Rose came running up, 12 years old now and all legs and energy. Behind her, her little brother Charlie toddled along, 2 years old and determined not to be left behind. "Mama, can we ride to the creek? Ask your father." "Papa said ask you." Eliza laughed. "Then yes, but be back before dark." She watched her children run toward the barn, their voices carrying on the evening air. Rowan appeared beside her, moving with the slight stiffness of a man whose old war wounds ached in cold weather. "You let them go to the creek alone?" "Rose is responsible. She'll watch Charlie. She's 12. And I was managing factory records at 13. She can handle a creek." Eliza leaned against him. "When did we become the worrying parents?" "Probably the moment Rose was born. It's been downhill since then." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the land they'd built together. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was theirs, earned through stubborn determination and love that grew in places no one expected. "Do you ever think about that day?" Rowan asked. "The platform?" "Sometimes. Mostly I think about how it led here. To this." She gestured at the ranch, the mountains, the life they'd made. "To us. You know what I remember most about that day?" "What?" "How scared you looked, and how hard you tried not to show it." He pulled her close. "You were the bravest person there, and nobody knew it but me." "I wasn't brave. I was desperate." Sometimes those are the same thing. The sun disappeared behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the distance, Rose's laughter echoed as she and Charlie played by the water. The ranch hands were finishing evening chores, and smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney. This was home. Not because it was perfect or easy, but because they'd chosen it, chosen each other, kept choosing through everything that tried to break them apart. Eliza had been the woman nobody wanted. Now she was the woman who'd built a life so full she couldn't imagine wanting anything else. That was the real victory. Not surviving the scrutiny or defeating Cutler or proving their marriage was legitimate. The victory was in the living, in the choosing, in building something real from broken pieces and refusing to let anyone tell them it wasn't enough. They'd started with nothing but a transaction and a desperate need to escape their circumstances. They'd ended with everything that mattered: love, family, home, purpose. And that, Eliza thought as Rowan kissed the top of her head and their children's laughter floated on the evening breeze, was more than enough. It was everything.